Chapter 217. In Tianjing's sewers, it was still damp and dark. Various modifications and buildings left behind over the years had turned this place into a chaotic labyrinth. In the depths of this labyrinth, there was a young man with blonde hair and blue eyes, his whole body emitting golden flames. There was no need for a flashlight. Just a bright light emitted from his body illuminated the entire underground space in front of him. Invisible psychic energy spread out from his body as if it was endless. It followed his footsteps and constantly scanned the area hundreds of meters around him. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at the wall in front of him. Is it here? The psychic energy slowly dissipated. He touched the wall with his hand and said, "Has he really left?" The next second, the young man punched out. His arm pierced through the wall as if it was a piece of tofu, creating a hole the size of a person in the wall in front of him. The young man walked into the cave and saw a place similar to a conference room appear in front of him. An ashtray full of cigarette butts and various video screenshots and photos related to Li Onping were posted all over the wall. The whole room looked as if someone had used it just a minute ago. The completely sealed environment made it so that there was not even a speck of dust in the room. Just then, a voice came from the young man's communicator. "Sir Golden Light, Sir Lucian wants you to come back quickly. The leader was attacked by a nuclear bomb in Baiwei." Golden Light casually flipped through a few pages of documents on the table. Even when he heard the news from the communicator, he was not nervous at all. So what? But a nuclear bomb attack. Do you think a nuclear bomb can kill him? Golden Light curled his lips. "Tell Lu Sheng to stop bothering me. Wait until I catch Peter Parker first." After saying that, he ignored the voice on the other side of the phone and hung up the communicator. A few days ago, Golden Light caught several members of the Avengers through the intelligence network. Unfortunately, they all claimed that they had quit the Avengers, so Golden Light could only send them to the prison cells into Xiaolongke base. Then, according to their confessions, he came to this secret stronghold in the underground of Tianjing. However, as he speculated, the other party had already left. At the press conference, all the cameras were focused on Fang Yong. "Everyone, just 4 hours ago, 10 nuclear bombs were detonated in the Terra Desert north of Baiwei. Li Onping was at the center of the explosion. According to our reliable information, Li Onping has been completely annihilated in the nuclear explosion. This crazy terrorist, the butcher, the executioner, is completely dead. Not even his bones remain. So I can finally stand here and comfort Imperial Father's spirit in heaven, and comfort the souls of the thousands of heroes who sacrificed themselves at the hands of Li Onping." When Fang Yong announced this on the TV, the entire 100 Moons Club became excited. Countless people rushed to tell each other. They were happy, and wildly celebrating. They celebrated the fact that the dark clouds that had been pressing on the hearts of everyone in the Bayou country for 10 days had finally dispersed. To celebrate the death of the Demon King, Fang Yong continued, "I want to tell Great Xia that we, the people of Baiwei, will never give in. No matter what kind of strong person, no matter what kind of army, just fight. The word surrender does not exist in the dictionary of the Baiwei people. If you want war, we'll give you war." Countless cheers sounded in front of the television. Thousands of young people's blood was ignited. They couldn't wait to go to the battlefield and fight Xia to the death. So they shouted and rushed to the streets. They used all kinds of methods to express the excitement in their hearts. Similar to them were the martial artists of the Bayou country. They almost filled all the taverns in Qi City. There were scenes of people cursing Li Onping and Xia everywhere. "Haha, Li Onping is lucky. If he doesn't die today, I'm going to make a move. At that time, it won't be as simple as being annihilated." "Bullshit, Sha Chong, what are you bragging about? Were you planning to run away this morning? You think I didn't see it?" Everyone in the tavern roared with laughter. Another person said, "I'm saying that we can get rid of Li Onping today because of his 7th prince." That's right. The old emperor was unlucky and was assassinated in the ice fortress. The eldest prince was too impulsive. In my opinion, the 7th prince is the best strategist. He's the best candidate for the throne. That's right. If it wasn't for the 7th prince turning the tide, there wouldn't be a Baiwei country. Umph. I heard that the Empress wanted to please Lianping. If it wasn't for the seventh prince's stubbornness, I'm afraid we would have become slaves of a conquered country. Just like this, along with the news of Lianping's death, a hidden force added fuel to the fire. It gradually molded the seventh prince, Feng Yong, into the country's hero. An undercurrent that revolved around the throne was quietly approaching. No, perhaps it couldn't be called an undercurrent. This was because in the entire Baiwei country, there was no one who could oppose Feng Yong, who had the merit of killing Lianping. He united the three major sects, controlled the imperial army and the elites of the royal family, controlled countless key sects, and dominated half of the royal palace. It could be said that under the pressure of Lianping, all the upper forces of the Baiwei country had no choice but to choose Feng Yong, who dared to take the lead in killing Lianping. Moreover, did Feng Yong have a nuclear bomb? Every time they thought of this question, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. On the other hand, among the remaining princes, there was no one who could be an equal to Feng Yong. Feng Yong, who had been oppressed by Feng Lai and the crown prince, finally stepped onto the stage he dreamed of. Xingming once again came to the royal study in the royal palace. Although it wasn't the first time he came to the royal study as the deputy commander of the imperial army, the changes in the situation today still made him nervous. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Feng Yong was still a prince, but it seemed normal for him to stay in the imperial study. No one objected to it. "Is it about my mother and sister?" Feng Yong asked. "Yes, your highness." Xingming organized his words and said slowly, "The empress and the princess have already surrendered. They are now being taken to the prison." Sigh. Feng Yong pretended to sigh. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to leave a bad impression, he would have killed these two traitorous women himself. They really surrendered. Although the imperial army had already made a move, they didn't have the guts to do anything to the two people who surrendered. What a bunch of trash. Next, Feng Yong comforted Xingming with a few more words and sent him away. Then he impatiently made a call. "Hello, how's the situation over there? Did you find it?" "No, we found some wreckage in the center of the nuclear explosion, but we still haven't found the real body." Feng Yong's brows furrowed. Unwilling to give up, he asked, "Must we find the body?" The temperature in the center of the nuclear explosion is hundreds of thousands of degrees. Maybe he has already been vaporized. The voice on the other end said eloquently, "That's impossible. The temperature in the air might be over 1 million degrees, but such a high temperature will only last for a few seconds. Then the temperature will drop rapidly. With Lianping's body's toughness, such a high temperature will burn his skin, trachea, and eyes. It will carbonize most of his body and might even kill him. But the time is too short. It's impossible for him to be vaporized. So if he really died, we'll definitely be able to find his body." Feng Yong's countenance sank. "You're saying that he didn't die?" "No, in fact, I don't think that anyone can survive such an attack. I just want to find his body." The man spoke with fervor and assurance. "I feel that his body was very likely brought a few kilometers away by the shock wave, or even hundreds of kilometers away. It might also have been torn into pieces and scattered in different places." However, there was suddenly no sound from the other end. "Hello, hello. Are you still there?" In the imperial study, Feng Yong had already hung up the phone. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He looked at the old man who had suddenly barged in with a guilty conscience and asked sincerely, "Grandpa Emperor, are you okay? Lianping should be dead. This time, it's all because of your hard work. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have the chance to detonate the nuclear bomb. Grandpa, I knew you'd be fine. I saw from the satellite that Lianping left the desert, so I let someone detonate the nuclear bomb." Feng Yong wasn't worried that the old man would kill him. After all, Lianping was already dead. Moreover, he detonated the nuclear bomb when the old man failed. He didn't want to kill both of them. Moreover, there was more than one person standing behind him. Feng Yuhuang was from Baiwei, after all, and not Lianping, who was unscrupulous. He thought that Feng Yuhuang might be very angry, but in the end, he wouldn't do anything to him. "Grandpa, don't worry. Lianping is dead. Now, Ice Fortress and Xia don't have any strong people. You're the number one in the eastern continent. Next, it's the era of Baiwei. But strangely, no matter what he said, Fan Yuhuang just looked at him coldly. The coldness in his eyes made him feel even more guilty. Chapter 218. Looking at Fan Yuhuang's cold face, Fan Yong didn't know what to say. Amidst the silence, Fan Yuhuang spoke. Who gave you the nuclear bomb? Baiwei doesn't have it. Ha, Grandpa. I bought it from an arms dealer in the black market. Fan Yong smiled. It basically used up all our savings. But Fan Yuhuang just looked at him expressionlessly. A strange look flashed in his eyes, but he still said, "Do you think I'll believe you?" Fan Yuhuang naturally wouldn't believe him, because he was an emperor himself. No one in the world had ever made a nuclear bomb. As for the countries that possessed nuclear bombs, none of them had ever leaked a nuclear bomb. Plus, this time it wasn't just one, but 2 nuclear bombs in the desert. That was 10 nuclear bombs. That was enough to destroy a small country. Hearing Fan Yuhuang's question, Fan Yong smiled. Grandpa, Fan Yuhuang said coldly, is it the League of Stars? Fan Yuhuang's words were like a sharp sword, stabbing into Fan Yong's heart. He looked at Fan Yuhuang and didn't deny it, because he knew it was useless. He just said something irrelevant. Grandpa, are you here to help me, or to help Baiwei? Helping Fan Yong naturally meant helping him get on the throne. With Fan Yuhuang's power, prestige, and countless connections in Baiwei's upper management, if he helped Fan Yong get on the throne, he would be as stable as Mount Tai. But if Fan Yuhuang was only here to help Baiwei, then Fan Yong might not be the one sitting on the throne. Fan Yuhuang sighed, as if he was lamenting about the scene in front of him. He only said one sentence, and it answered all of Fan Yong's questions. Li Onping is not dead. Is that so? Fan Yong's eyes flashed with disappointment, but he calmed himself down and said, there are more than 10 nuclear bombs. Grandpa, what's your position now? Fan Yuhuang naturally understood what Fan Yong meant, and he knew that his grandson underestimated Li Onping. If he didn't put too much focus on hatred, perhaps this scene wouldn't have happened. Facing Fan Yong's question, Fan Yuhuang sighed again. Perhaps today was the day he sighed the most in his life. I've lost completely. So I became Li Onping's subordinate. Fan Yong laughed out loud, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. The respect on his face was completely gone, and he coldly looked at Fan Yuhuang, as if the person in front of him wasn't a powerful level 5 ability user, but an old man. So, you're here to kill me? I said, there are more than 10 nuclear bombs. Hearing Fan Yong's words, Fan Yuhuang's face darkened. That's why I came first, and I'm only here now. Yuhuang. S2's words is twos, a trace of disbelief and doubt appeared on his face. Yuhuang's to pick Huang Tu's Yong S. Fan Yuhuang just looked at him, as if he didn't care at all. When no one answered the first call, Fan Yong frowned. When no one answered the fourth call, his back was soaked in cold sweat. He leaned back on the chair. At this moment, it seemed like all the strength in his body was gone. When did this happen? After the nuclear explosion, I came to Qi City. What Fan Yuhuang didn't say was, under the command of his Qi incarnation, he didn't rush into the explosion to help Li Onping, because Li Onping didn't need help. Instead, he came to Qi City and began to investigate the source of the nuclear bombs, the people involved, and the location of the rest of the bombs. Relying on his level 5 ability user skills, plus his identity as the retired emperor, Fan Yuhuang easily obtained this information. In order not to alert the enemy, he didn't help the escaping Dragon Sparrow guards and Xia's diplomatic group. It wasn't until Li Onping arrived at Qilin City that the two of them split up and traversed the greater part of the 100 Moon continent at an astonishing speed. It was only after they had taken control of the remaining 3 nuclear bombs that Li Onping arrived at the Imperial Palace and stood before Fan Yong. I guess that you might have spares, but I didn't expect you to put one under the palace. Looking at Fan Yuhuang's fierce eyes, Fan Yong seemed to be fearless. He smiled and said, if someone wants to kill me, they will come to the palace to kill me. Once my heart stops beating, the nuclear bomb under our feet will explode. I just didn't expect that the one who came to kill me would be you. It's better than dying in his hands. The him, that Fang Yuhuang was referring to was naturally Li Anping. If the grandson in front of him was handed over to Li Anping, he didn't know what kind of torture he would suffer before he died. A trace of disdain flashed in Fang Yong's eyes. Even if the old man in front of him had the greatest power in the world, he was nothing more than an old dog who had betrayed his country for glory after admitting defeat to Li Anping. Even if this old dog was once someone he respected and worshipped incomparably. However, he didn't try to anger the old man. Instead, he said calmly, "If I die, half of Qi City's people will die with me. I don't ask for anything else. Let me leave here. I will go to the Western continent and never come back." Just as Fang Yong was trying to negotiate with Fang Yuhuang, Li Anping kicked open the door and walked in. Outside the gate, all the guards fell to the ground, unconscious. Even until the moment before they died, they did not know how they died. When Fang Yong saw Li Anping barge in, he was slightly shocked. However, when he saw the bomb in his hand, his face changed. "Are you crazy? There's a level detection device in this bomb. As long as it's not level with the ground, it will explode." Li Anping's face didn't change. He said coldly, "Don't worry, my hand is very steady." Li Anping was right. His hand was very steady. It might be the steadiest hand in the world. Even if an armor-piercing bullet hit his hands wouldn't move at all. Therefore, when he came to the ground, he killed all the people he saw in the palace and came to Fang Yuhuang's side. The hand holding the bomb didn't change at all. Seeing that the bomb in Li Anping's hand didn't explode, Fang Yong's mind calmed down. However, in the next second, Li Anping's action made his heart skip a beat again. This was because the other party stretched out his hand and tossed the warhead directly to Fang Yuhuang. "No!" Fang Yong roared. His eyes were red as he stared at the bomb in the air. He didn't expect Fang Yong to do that. How dare he? Does he want to kill everyone in Qi City? Am I going to die like this? However, there wasn't much time for Fang Yong to think. A spark lit up from the bomb, but the explosion in front of him was like a miniature firework. A small fireball lit up in the air. Not only was the fireball small, but it was also very dark. It didn't look like a nuclear bomb at all. It was as if there was a layer of invisible power that wrapped around it, preventing it from crossing the sea. There was only one reason for all of this, and it was naturally Fang Yuhuang who was standing at the side. He had performed the ability of the 33 paradises and stretched the space around the bomb by 33,000 kilometers. The shock wave, flames, heat, and light were all good. The 33,000 kilometers had become a natural moat. It was impossible for the bomb to threaten the 3 people in front of him, let alone the people in Qi City. Fang Yong didn't say anything until the fireball had completely dissipated. He just looked at the spot where the bomb had disappeared in a daze, speechless. Li Anping glanced at him and said calmly, "I've already found out that it was the people from the League of Stars who contacted you. Tell me their contact person. I'll be able to kill fewer people." Fang Yong said dejectedly, "Just kill me. I acted on my own accord. It has nothing to do with them." Li Anping said coldly, "Therefore, everyone who is directly related to this attack must die." Chapter 219. Although Li Anping looked unscathed right now, without a single injury on his body, it was impossible to tell that he had experienced a nuclear explosion. That was because he had used up a lot of soul energy to heal his body. In order to resist the high temperature, light, radiation, and shockwave, Li Anping had used up hundreds of thousands of soul energy. It was equivalent to losing hundreds of thousands of clones. If it was not for his powerful regeneration ability, Li Anping might not have been able to escape from serious injuries or even death. How could he not be angry? Li Anping, who was in the Imperial study, looked at Fang Yuhuang and said coldly, "He is your grandson. Find out where the Star Alliance member in 100 Moons is and kill him." After that, he did not look at Fang Yong and Fang Yuhuang anymore. He knew that Fang Yuhuang would definitely do as he said. Fang Yuhuang was a person who was afraid of death. In order to pursue the highest level of power, he would pay any price. Therefore, before he reached the peak, he would definitely not want to die. Moreover, he still had the psychic clone on him to monitor and control Fang Yuhuang. Therefore, Li Onping walked out of the imperial study without worry. Then, he heard the sounds of the entire palace. Some were celebrating excitedly. Some were worried about the future of the 100 months. Some were sleeping. Some were sleepy. And some were eating supper. Some of the imperial guards found the corpses that Li Onping had left behind along the way. The entire palace seemed to have turned into a clear, three-dimensional model that appeared in Li Onping's mind. The most eye-catching thing was that a large group of imperial guards was following the corpses that he had left behind and quickly ran toward the imperial study. At the same time, a large group of soldiers outside the imperial city had closed all 4 gates and were providing support to the various checkpoints. It seemed like they were going to surround the entire imperial city. Listening to all the information that was transmitted to his ears, Li Onping sneered. He raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. The crisp snap of his fingers was like the beginning of the music of death. It traveled through the silent night sky and spread to the entire imperial city. In that instant, with Li Onping as the center, everything within 600 meters of him instantly turned into a silent hell. At this moment, all the souls of the mortals were completely devoured, not leaving a single drop behind. They turned into powerful nutrients for Li Onping and flowed into his sea of consciousness. As for those who had lost their souls, all that was left was an empty shell. A large number of imperial guards fell to the ground, leaving only a small number of ability users standing where they were, looking at the scene in front of them in horror. What happened? We're under attack. Everyone back off. Unfortunately, whether it was their experience, ability, powerful physical skills, or tacit cooperation, it was all meaningless now. The black figure was like a bolt of black lightning, flashing between them. By the time they reacted, fatal blood flowers had already bloomed on these ability users' bodies. Some of them had their necks broken, some had holes in their chests, and some were directly smashed into the wall, becoming a pile of minced meat. They couldn't see the power roaming around the imperial palace, and they couldn't defend against Li Onping's casual attacks. As a result, when all the ordinary people were killed in the first second, the ability users began to suffer Li Onping's merciless slaughter. Among them, 3 imperial guards fled towards the northern gate. Suddenly, the person running at the very back let out a miserable scream. The 2 in front turned around, only to see Li Onping grabbing the screaming person's head. As the other party struggled for his life, he crushed the other party's skull, and the miserable scream came to an abrupt end. The head that exploded was like a blooming flower, leaving behind a dark red bloodstain on the ground. When they saw this scene, the remaining 2 people became even more scared, screaming crazily as they fled towards the northern gate. The pitter-patter of footsteps sounded behind them, like the sound of death's bell, announcing the end of their lives. Another cry of alarm sounded. The leading imperial guard turned around, but there was no one behind him. He was the only one left on the empty street. "Spare me. I beg you, please let me go." He knelt on the ground, screaming crazily. However, at the next moment, he suddenly stuck out his tongue, and there seemed to be some liquid dripping onto his face. His tongue licked the liquid on his face, and his expression immediately changed. "It's blood." A rain of blood suddenly appeared above his head, and countless pieces of corpses fell from the sky, landing on his body and beside him. It was the corpse of the imperial guard who had gone missing earlier. He had been grabbed by Li Onping into the sky, torn into countless pieces, and then scattered down. Looking at the flesh and blood all over his body, the last imperial guard screamed crazily and charged towards the northern gate. This time around, he wasn't attacked on the way. Perhaps Li Onping had let him off for the time being. Hearing the miserable screams coming from the imperial palace, he ran faster and faster, wishing that he could grow 4 legs. After turning another corner, his eyes suddenly lit up, and the northern gate of the imperial palace appeared before his eyes. Countless spotlights were still shining on the city gate, and there were many people outside the imperial palace, as if many people were already standing there. However, the strange thing was that there were so many people, but he couldn't hear any noise at all. But this time, he couldn't care less. He revealed an excited smile and quickened his pace towards the north gate. However, when he got close to the city gate, he suddenly realized that there were countless soldiers standing outside the imperial palace. They looked at him strangely, and they kept shouting something, but he couldn't hear anything. Then he realized that there was something strange about the city gate. Not only could he not hear the sounds outside the imperial palace, but he also realized that no matter how he ran, the city gate seemed to be right in front of him, but he couldn't get closer. There seemed to be an invisible barrier between him and the city gate, and no matter how he ran, he couldn't reach the other side of the city gate. What's going on? What's going on? Unfortunately, he would never know the answer. Just like the city gate in front of him, it looked close, but he couldn't cross it even if he used his entire life. With a soft sound, a white shockwave shot through the Imperial Guard's chest. He looked at the wound on his chest, and his eyes gradually lost focus. On the other side of the city gate, when the soldiers saw Li Onping appear behind the Imperial Guard and kill him, they immediately became excited. Countless guns were fired at Li Onping, but once the bullets got close to the city gate, they immediately slowed down. Then, they almost stopped flying in the air for a while, and finally fell to the ground powerlessly. No matter how many bullets and how many guns were fired, the result was the same. A few people wanted to rush over, but no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't reach the Imperial Palace. They could only watch helplessly as Li Onping cruelly killed the Imperial Guards who had escaped one by one. There was nothing they could do. The same scene happened to the Southern Gate, Western Gate, and Eastern Gate. It happened at the edge of the Imperial Palace. When the Jade Emperor used the 33 grotto heavens to envelop the entire Imperial Palace, no one could leave this place of death. No one could enter. They could only wait quietly, waiting for Li Onping to kill them one by one. Crying, begging, resisting, hiding, it was all meaningless. It took about 20 minutes for Li Onping to completely massacre the entire palace. Everyone, including the Imperial Guards, some members of the royal family, and the ministers, were all killed. The only exceptions were Feng Yong, Jade Emperor, Yelu Mengxiang, and Feng Yuelin. There was no need to talk about Jade Emperor. Feng Yong still had some things to ask, so he didn't kill him. As for Yelu Mengxiang and Feng Yuelin, Li Onping naturally felt that they were useful to 100 Moon City. Moreover, with Feng Yong adding fuel to the fire, the people who surrendered had already become the target of disdain for most of 100 Moon City's people. If they continue to take over 100 Moon City's affairs, it would be very beneficial for Li Onping. Now, Li Onping felt that Jade Emperor's ability was very useful, and he could make use of it more often in the future. Therefore, he planned to let Jade Emperor become the ruler of 100 Moon City in name, but let Yelu Mengxiang manage the details. This way, he could use Jade Emperor to his heart's content and have him do a lot of things for him. Moreover, when he came in front of Yelu Mengxiang, she told him a piece of information that he was very interested in. It was information about 100 Moon City's imperial family's treasury. Chapter 220. Outside the palace, a helicopter was hovering in the air. Inside the helicopter was a reporter from the TV station. Everyone, an hour ago, the palace was attacked by an unknown ability user. Now, the army has surrounded the entire palace. However, they still haven't found a way to enter the palace. As the camera moved, the palace under the helicopter appeared in everyone's sight. Looking down from the top, the entire palace was covered in blood. There were corpses and broken pieces everywhere. At the edge of the palace, there were soldiers and martial artists trying to rush into the palace. However, because of the 33 paradises, they could never really get close to the palace. Once they got close to the walls, they couldn't even move a centimeter forward. In the air, a few paratroopers jumped down from the sky and tried to land on the palace. However, when they landed 50 meters above the palace, they stopped. No, it didn't completely stop. Just by looking at their bodies, they were still falling. It seemed that no matter how they landed, they were always 50 meters away from the ground. If the 33 paradises didn't disappear, these paratroopers would probably stay in the air forever until they landed a full 33,000 kilometers. Obviously, they would be dead by then. Outside the palace, a general pointed at the helicopter in the sky and said angrily, "What is that? Who let them up?" "General, It's the people from the TV station. Why aren't you letting them go? The general roared. We can't let this be reported. We can't let anyone know that Li Onping is still alive. Compared to the chaos outside the palace, the inside of the palace had become a dead zone. Under the cover of the moonlight, it was extremely quiet and empty. Because in the entire imperial city, there were only 5 people left alive. Li Onping was currently leading Yelu Mengxiang and Fang Yuelin to the palace's treasury. In his ears, the conversation between Fang Yuhuang and Fang Yong could be heard. Sir, this way. Yelu Mengxiang pointed at an inconspicuous small room. Oh, the treasury is here? Li Onping looked at it and naturally swept his psychic energy over it. Sure enough, he found that there was something special about it. After Yelu Mengxiang opened the door to the room, she opened one of the cabinets and pressed a few inconspicuous buttons. The cabinets changed and revealed a secret door. Behind the secret door was an elevator. After Yelu Mengxiang's fingerprint and iris scan, the elevator door opened. Li Onping and the other 2 walked in. Li Onping stood in the elevator and felt the entire elevator descending at an astonishing speed. Yelu Mengxiang explained, this was built by the 100 Moon Empire's founding ancestor, Fang Ziki, after the empire was founded. Later, it passed through the hands of successive 100 Moon Empire's rulers, and naturally, it was constantly modified. After all, this is the royal family's treasury, and there are countless treasures and manuals stored here. As she spoke, Yelu Mengxiang's heart couldn't help but beat faster. She looked at the demonic beast in front of her, afraid that he would twist her head off at any moment. As if sensing Yelu Mengxiang's nervousness, Li Onping said lightly, you 2 are very sensible. I won't kill you. As long as you are obedient, you will still be the empress and princess of the 100 Moon Empire. Fang Yuelin was silent for a moment. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, how do you plan to deal with old 7? What about his subordinates? Yuelin. Yelu Mengxiang tried to dissuade him. At the same time, she looked worriedly at Li Onping, afraid of angering him. However, Li Onping knew that this woman didn't mean to dissuade him. She was just cooperating with Fang Yuelin to test how he would deal with Fang Yang's people. It's fine. So he signaled to Yelu Mengxiang that it was fine. He continued, Fang Yong must die. As for those who rely on him, those who are directly related to this nuclear explosion must die. As for the others, let's not pursue them for now. We can take it slow in the future. Yelu Mengxiang heaved a sigh of relief. She was most worried that Li Onping would indiscriminately slaughter the people of the 100 Moon Empire. That would be the worst possible situation. Logically speaking, she wasn't willing to face such a situation. However, Fang Yuelin was still dissatisfied. He tried to dissuade her. The leader is just old 7 alone. His subordinates are all innocent. Moreover, it's too difficult to define a direct relationship. Once the radish is pulled out and mud is mixed in, I'm afraid that thousands of people will be implicated. Li Onping looked at Fang Yuelin indifferently. His cold gaze directly blocked the other party's next words. Then, Fang Yuelin felt a chill in his left ear. Yelu Mengxiang let out a scream. Fang Yuelin's left ear had been cut off by Li Onping. He looked at the ear that had fallen to his feet and immediately reached out to cover the wound. He couldn't help but let out a scream. Blood kept flowing out from the wound on the ear. Yelu Mengxiang quickly went up and held Fang Yuelin's body. She tore off her clothes and wrapped them around the wound. However, Fang Yuelin had been rolling around in the martial world for many years. His strong body, 4th energy rank ability, and the ability of the Qilin blood. Although it looked like he was bleeding a lot, his injuries weren't serious. At this moment, Li Onping's cold voice rang out in her ears. Woman, know your status. The reason you're alive now isn't because you have the qualifications. It's because of my mercy. If you try to negotiate with me again, I'll personally wring your neck. Do you understand? Fang Yuelin clenched his fists tightly. His face turned from white to green. The pain from his wound seemed to be completely incomparable to the coldness in Li Onping's words. She said softly, I understand. Li Onping snorted coldly and no longer cared about him. Yellow Mengxiang didn't dare to say anything. She knew that Li Onping's words were not only for Fang Yuelin, but also for herself. 10 seconds later, the elevator slowly came to a stop. By now, the three of them had descended more than 300 meters from the ground. The Baiwei kingdom shouldn't have such technical means. Moreover, they dug more than 300 meters when they were establishing their country. It seems that they used their ability to create it. With this thought in mind, Li Onping walked out of the elevator first. Yelu Mengxiang walked in front for the rest of the journey. The first thing they saw was a door with a sound detection system. After Yelu Mengxiang shouted her name 3 times, the door slowly opened. On the square that was several hundred meters wide, there were piles of gold, cash, and all sorts of expensive antiques, calligraphy, and paintings before the three of them. Yelu Mengxiang introduced, "This is the wealth accumulated by the royal family since the founding of the Baiwei kingdom. It's hard to estimate the total value. My conservative guess is that it's around 100 billion. However, ever since His Majesty was registered, the national treasury has been tight. About 20 billion has been taken out of the palace treasury." The His Majesty that Yelu Mengxiang was talking about was naturally her husband, the Qilin king. Fang Yuelin covered her wound and stared at the shocking wealth before her with a dumbfounded expression. She had never thought that the royal family would have so much wealth hidden in the palace treasury. She thought to herself, so much money. How good would it be if I took it all out to build the Baiwei kingdom? However, she subconsciously glanced at Li Onping again, and her expression darkened. Forget it. Even if I take out all this money to build up the army and ability users, what's the use of it against this bastard? Li Onping didn't really care about the wealth before him. He didn't plan to transport all this money back to the Baiwei kingdom. Instead, he gave it to Yelu Mengxiang and the others to use and invest in the construction of the Baiwei kingdom. In his eyes, regardless of whether it was Xia or the Baiwei kingdom, they were all countries that he needed to liberate. Therefore, the three of them continued forward. They crossed several hundred meters and headed towards the next level of the palace treasury. At the back of the first level of the palace treasury, there was a huge door that looked like a bank safe. Yelu Mengxiang entered 12 passwords in a row, and after a facial recognition, the door slowly opened. The second level of the Baiwei royal family's palace treasury appeared before the three of them. Compared to the luxurious and dazzling first level of the palace treasury, the second level of the palace treasury was much more desolate. The entire second level of the palace treasury could be seen at a glance. Other than the 12 huge pillars, there was a large iron door that led to the third level of the palace treasury. Chapter 2:21. The 12 cylinders in front of him contained the bodies of the past emperors of the Baiwei country. Without exception, they were all level 4 ability users. Li Onping observed them carefully. The closer the bodies were to the modern era, the better preserved they were. The last 3 bodies looked especially lifelike, as if they were still alive and just sleeping. Obviously, as time went on, the technology of preserving bodies became more and more complete. Each of the 12 emperors was one of the most powerful ability users of their generation when they were alive. They had awakened all kinds of bloodline abilities. However, they still could not escape the passage of time. After they died, they could only leave their bodies for the descendants of the Fang family to worship. However, when Li Onping looked at the 12 cylinders, his eyes suddenly became serious. It turned out that there were only 11 emperors' bodies in the 12 containers. Inside one of the containers was a strange thing. It was a piece of meat that looked like the tail of some kind of creature. It was floating in a pool of liquid. The piece of meat was about 1 meter long and 20 centimeters in diameter. Its surface was covered with a layer of fine black scales. "What's this?" Yelu Mengxiang saw it and walked to Li Onping's side. She explained, "This thing has existed since the founding of the Baiwei country. I don't know if you've heard some rumors. It's said that Fang Ziki, the first emperor of the Baiwei country, was able to rise in the chaotic world because he obtained the treasure left by Xinghe, the founding emperor of the Shang dynasty 2,000 years ago. He created the history of the Baiwei country for hundreds of years." "Oh, is it true?" Is this thing the treasure left by Xinghe? Li Yonping looked at the piece of meat in the container with great interest. Suddenly, a strange feeling of hunger came from his heart. He seemed to be starving all of a sudden. The piece of meat in front of him became a delicious meal at this moment. Every cell in his body seemed to be shouting and cheering. Eat it! Eat it! Eat it! Eat it! Li Yonping felt that every cell in his body was craving the meat in front of him. His throat even secreted a large amount of saliva, causing him to involuntarily gulp down his saliva. Yilu Mingxiang obviously did not notice Li Yonping's abnormality. She continued, according to the records of the royal family, the founding emperor did find a relic of the Shang dynasty. However, it was not a treasure left by Xinghe. It was a battlefield left behind by an ancient ability user. This piece of meat was found there. Other than that, there are also some books of secret martial arts. However, the royal family did not record the use of this piece of the Shang dynasty. We had sent people to study it, but there was no conclusion. It looked like the tail of some creature, but it was really just a rock. If it weren't for the rules set by Emperor Taizu that it must be properly preserved, I'm afraid this thing would have long been cleared out of the palace treasury. Yes. Since Li Yonping had asked for it, Yilu Mingxiang naturally had no objections. Moreover, in her eyes, this thing was just a useless piece of stone. She did not know what it was used for. Even if the founding emperor had ordered them to keep it well, not to mention that the founding emperor had been dead for so many years. Even if he came back from the dead, he would probably have to listen to Li Yonping. Then, the three of them walked to the third level of the treasury. The second level of the treasury contained the corpses of the past emperors. They were very important to the royal family, but to Li Yonping, they were nothing. Other than the piece of stone that aroused his hunger, he was not interested in the other things. When they reached the door of the third level of the treasury, Yilu Mingxiang sighed and said, "Only the past emperors of the 100 Moon Dynasty can enter the third level of the treasury. I don't have this authority anymore. I'm afraid that in the world, only Grandpa can enter." Li Yonping did not say anything. He walked forward and touched the huge iron door in front of him. The iron door was circular and seemed to be made of some unknown alloy. It was a bit like the door of a bank vault, but it was bigger and heavier than that. In fact, it was not only the door that was very strong. The entire third level of the treasury was wrapped in 9 layers of special alloy. In other words, the entire third level of the treasury was a metal cabinet. If they wanted to go in, the only way was to open the door. "The secret martial arts manuals are inside?" Li Yonping asked while touching the door. Yilu Mingxiang nodded. The third level of the treasury is the last level. It contains all the precious secret martial arts that have been collected since the founding of the 100 Moon Dynasty. This was what His Majesty told me before he died. Any prince who wants to learn the secret martial arts must apply to His Majesty 3 months in advance. However, because of the appearance of level 5 ability users, and because the secret martial arts in the palace treasury were too profound, the requirements for the cultivator's aptitude were also very high. As a result, fewer and fewer people applied. In the last decade or so, there was almost no one who applied. Moreover, even if you want to cultivate the ancient ability, there are many sects in the 100 Moon country that have secret martial arts inheritances. The secret martial arts in these sects not only have low requirements, but also have masters to guide them. Even if most members of the royal family want to cultivate, they will not consider the manuals stored in the treasury. The third level of the treasury has not been opened for a long time. His Majesty Yilu Mingxiang spoke of was obviously the Qilin king. Li Yonping nodded when he heard this. Up until now, no one had cultivated the ancient ability to the 5th level. In addition to the high requirements for cultivation and the time and energy required to cultivate, they had always been looked down upon by the ability users of the other 5 major abilities. In addition, the secret manuals were controlled by the upper echelons of the government. They would not be open to ordinary people to cultivate. Even if they were open to ordinary people to cultivate, because of the lack of talent, not many people could cultivate it. Because of these reasons, Ancient ability users' overall strength had always been much weaker than the other 5 major ability users. However, Li Onping still valued these manuals. The 100 Moon Country did not have the courage to open these manuals, but that did not mean he did not. The other organizations felt that these manuals were difficult to mass-produce because of the high requirements for the cultivator's talent. It was better to research modern weapons. However, Li Onping still wanted to give it a try. He felt that there was always a way to solve these technical problems. For example, his own immortal body was the best experimental material. There were also the countless clones in the 8th Research Institute. There were also good materials to cultivate these secret martial arts. Thinking of this, Li Onping's lips curled into a smile. Both of you, take a few steps back. Yilu Mingxiang and Fang Yuelin clearly guessed what he was going to do. They did not have the courage to stop him. They could only quickly retreat to avoid being accidentally injured by Li Onping. Seeing that they had retreated far enough, Li Onping raised his right fist. Black qi began to gather in the center of his palm. Like pitch-black, viscous ink, his entire fist was wrapped up. The door in front of him was very thick, but Li Onping felt that he could break it open. The only problem was that he had to control his strength so that he would not damage the manuals in the inner treasury. Carefully controlling his strength, Li Onping gently extended his right fist and smashed it against the door of the inner treasury. Although it looked like Li Onping had only lightly punched, the result was terrifying. The entire door let out a loud bang. Then it deformed and caved in. A hoarse, disgusting sound of metal rubbing against each other came from the door, making Yilu Mingxiang and Fang Yuelin, who were standing a few hundred meters away, feel annoyed. When the loud bang stopped, the entire metal door had completely deformed and caved in by about 2 meters. However, there was still no opening to the inside. This surprised Li Onping. Did I use too little strength? Thinking of this, Li Onping carefully raised his fist again. His fist was covered in black psyche qi, and like a heavy hammer, he hit the dented metal door. There was another boom. This time, the sound was shorter and sharper than the previous one. When Li Onping pulled back his right fist, the entire metal door had slowly separated from the door frame and receded inwards. Even the door frame could not withstand Li Onping's immense strength and cracked open. The passageway to the 3rd floor of the inner treasury was open in front of Li Onping. Chapter 222. The 3rd floor's inner treasury was much smaller than the 2nd floor's inner treasury. It was only about 50 square meters. In the empty room, there was only one bookshelf. There were a dozen books scattered on the bookshelf. Each book was carefully selected by the Bioware royal family. Among the many ancient abilities, or secret martial arts, they were the top existences. There were even a few books that the Bioware emperor at that time was worried that if they were passed down, it would threaten the status of the royal family. Therefore, they kept them in the inner treasury to prevent others from practicing. Because the Bioware country had always been behind many big countries in terms of technology, they were worried that the high-tech storage method would be stolen. Therefore, these ancient books were stored in the most ancient way. Li Onping casually picked up a book to read. The content inside described a secret martial art called the Great Sun Profound Qi. In the beginning, it was only used to strengthen the body. However, once the qualifications to practice it met the requirements, one could cultivate a flame called the inextinguishable light fire. Not only was its lethality shocking, but it also had the effect of healing. Therefore, at the beginning of the ancient book, it introduced the method to test the qualifications. Li Onping put down the ancient book and picked up a few more to read. They were the indefinite true technique, the northern black tortoise secret finger, the selfless divine consciousness, and so on. There were a total of 16 ancient books. Each book recorded a top martial art that could be cultivated to various strange, mysterious, and powerful abilities. After Li Onping read it, he couldn't help but want to try it. This was probably something that anyone who pursued great power couldn't help but do. However, these 16 ancient books had one thing in common, and that was the beginning of their books. First, It introduced the qualifications and requirements needed to cultivate this martial art. Although Lianping was very interested in these 16 secret martial arts, when he looked at them carefully, he found that he was only able to meet the requirements for 3 of them. He had to find time to test it according to the method given in the ancient book. With Lianping's strong physical fitness, only 3 secret martial arts could meet the requirements. These top secret martial arts requirements for the cultivator's qualifications could be imagined. Most of their requirements had nothing to do with physical or mental strength. They paid more attention to the talent of the cultivator. Lianping looked at it. There were only 3 secret martial arts that he could possibly cultivate. They were called Heaven Thinking Een Kill, Crimson Phoenix Flame Extinguishing Slash, and Immortal Thunder Aperture. They were all martial arts that had extremely strict requirements on one's physical fitness. Of course, in Lianping's opinion, the ancient abilities they cultivated could also be ranked in the top 5 of these 16 ancient books. However, Lianping didn't give up on the other 13 ancient books. He had an immortal body, so he didn't have to worry about any problems during cultivation. He planned to experiment with all 16 ancient books, and at the same time, asked the 8th Research Institute to follow up and study them. They wanted to see if there was a way to make the ancient ability cultivation more common, or to reach the 5th level. When Lianping put down the last book in his hand, he suddenly found a scroll at the bottom of the bookshelf. The entire scroll was wrapped in a black cloth bag. If one didn't look carefully, it would be easy to miss it. Yelu Mingxiang saw Lianping pick up the scroll and explained, "I heard His Majesty say that one of the ancient books in the collection is a painting scroll. It was also obtained by Emperor Taizu and that strange stone. I heard that even before Emperor Taizu died, he couldn't forget the contents of the painting scroll. He said that it contained the strongest secret martial arts. However, although the successive Baiwei emperors studied the contents of the painting scroll, they didn't find anything." After hearing Yelu Mingxiang's explanation, Fang Yuelin disagreed. It had been hundreds of years since the founding of the Baiwei Empire. How could the secret martial arts of that time compare to a few hundred meters, especially with the rapid development of society after modernization? The other 16 secret martial arts books were at least 50 years ago, and there were still people who cultivated and improved on them. As for the so-called strongest secret martial arts hidden in the painting scroll, even if it was really strong at that time, it was now at least a few hundred years behind the theory. Even if it was taken out, it would probably only be a second or third-rate secret martial art. It wasn't just Fang Yuelin who thought this. Lianping obviously thought the same. After all, the era was developing, and not everything was more powerful the older it was. But when Lianping stretched out his hand and unfolded the scroll, revealing the entire painting scroll in front of him, his eyes immediately revealed a look of shock. "This is the hell painting?" And Yelu Mingxiang looked at Lianping strangely and asked, "Sir, what did you say?" Seeing that Lianping was still silent, she thought for a moment and explained, "There's a line of words on this picture, but we've invited a lot of historians to study it, but they couldn't recognize the dynasty's words and don't know what it means." Lianping didn't answer, and he didn't explain to Yelu Mengxiang that he could read those words. There was no reason, no memory. It was just that when Lianping saw those strange words, he realized that he could understand the meaning of those words. The first volume of the Hell's Painting, this is the meaning of that line of words. But this wasn't what really shocked Lianping. What really surprised him was the content of this so-called Hell's Painting. On the boundless white land, there are all kinds of monsters that only existed in fantasy. A giant with 2 heads, a lion with a scorpion tail, a lion with bat wings, a tiger the size of a small mountain, and a giant spider with the upper body of a woman. All kinds of monsters appeared vividly on the Hell's map. They killed and devoured each other. Scenes of gory scenes were displayed. All of these were exactly the same as what Lianping saw in Black's memories in the dream. All kinds of familiar feelings rose in his heart. As this familiar feeling rose in his heart, countless information was transmitted into his mind from the Hell's Painting. The Hell's Painting recorded a special kind of secret martial art, or a systematic cultivation method. It was divided into 7 levels. Except for the first level, which was enlightenment, the other 6 levels were to reconstruct a creature's respiratory system, digestive system, endocrine system, circulatory system, nervous system, and motor system. In the next moment, Li Onping felt that the psychic qi in his body began to surge out uncontrollably. At the same time, the soul in his sea of consciousness gushed out, turning into the best fuel. The black psychic qi became a burning flame, burning the soul that gushed out. Li Onping's physical body, on the other hand, had become an excellent furnace for these fuels and flames to burn. Li Onping looked at the black psychic qi that was rising all over his body and muttered, "So that's how it is?" Although Li Onping's physical fitness didn't improve at all. But at this moment, the first level of the hell's painting, blood body, used the soul as the fuel, the psychic qi as the flame, and the body as the furnace. It was the first step for a creature to advance to the transcendent. It was a success. However, more questions arose in Li Onping's mind. The Shang Dynasty, by Xinghe, countless secret martial arts, by Yu, Feng Ziki, the demons, the land of white, and the first volume of the Hell's painting before him. What was the relationship between all of these? A series of shocking changes happened in Baiyu until the entire royal palace was surrounded, causing panic in the entire Qilin city. In a mysterious meeting room in the faraway western land, 5 men and women with different appearances were sitting around a round table. One of the men, who was thin and weak and was wrapped in a layer of black cloak, said in a hoarse voice, "Queen of Heaven, why have you called us here?" Beside him was a man who was even stranger than him. The man was tall and strong, but he was wearing white armor that clearly didn't belong to modern people. Even his head was covered by a helmet. He said with an indifferent expression, "I still have 30 minutes before I start today's prayer. If you have anything to say it quickly." On the other side of the table, the Queen of Heaven with blonde hair and blue eyes looked like a goddess from the heavenly palace. Each and every one of her actions exuded astonishing charm. However, the other 3 men and 1 woman turned a blind eye to this. It was as if they didn't see the beauty that the Queen of Heaven displayed at all. The Queen of Heaven didn't mind either. She only raised the document in her hand and said, "I know that all of you are important figures in your countries or forces and have a lot of things to do every day. However, I think that if I were to just send this information over, what awaits me would be a long investigation, evidence collection, discussions, and countless meetings. Therefore, the reason why I've invited the 4 of you here today is so that I can personally tell you the following news." Next to the Queen of Heaven was a man with brilliant blonde hair who wore a black suit. He looked like the most normal person here. However, his expression remained cold, as if he was looking at a pile of meat. After the Queen of Heaven finished speaking, the man used his finger to push up the glasses on his nose bridge and said expressionlessly, "Compared to what you're going to say, I'm more concerned about the series of abnormal movements that the League of Stars has been making in the Federation and the Code Country recently. I've been waiting for your explanation for a very long time." The Queen of Heaven let out a few giggles and revealed an ambiguous gaze toward the man. She said, "Uranus, don't be anxious. Let's take a look at these documents first." Saying that, the Queen of Heaven clapped her hands. In the center of the round table, a circular column rose up and started to play a series of images. The special structure allowed the contents of the video to be seen from all 360 degrees around the column. The first thing that appeared was the video of Li Onping's battle with Kano in Jadeite City. The Queen of Heaven added, "This set of information comes from Violet. All the other records and people's memories were erased by de Xia Laikon." Next was the scene of Li Onping's battle with Qing Chan in the True God cult. There was Song Bang, Lei Di, and Blood Demon. Finally, it was Marok. The scene was fixed at the time when Li Onping was catapulted and started to regenerate rapidly. At the same time, many small windows opened up around the scene. They were all information about the city center of Marok, where several tens of thousands of citizens had died due to unknown reasons. The Queen of Heaven looked at everyone who was deep in thought and said, "I've sent this specific information to everyone. Do you have any thoughts?" No one said anything. After a moment of silence, a young lady with flaming red hair who was still next to the blonde man, said, "Human freak? That's right. It has only been less than a year since this Li Onping obtained his abilities. Everyone present has witnessed the speed at which he is getting stronger. Especially the data shown in the information. I can't help but suspect that there are similarities between him and human freak." The strong man wearing armor was the first to stand up. "I'll investigate this matter myself. If Li Onping is really related to human freak, our Church of Universal Truth will definitely not let him off." After he finished speaking, his body flickered and disappeared. It turned out that the person who was sitting at the conference table was a holographic image. Next to him, the man whose entire body was wrapped up in a black cloak had also disappeared at some point in time. He had not said a single word before he left. The blonde man and the red-haired lady nodded to the Queen of Heaven and said, "We'll go and verify Li Onping's matter. However, the series of incidents that the League of Stars has caused in our country won't be let off so easily." With that, the blonde man used his index finger to press down on the glasses on his nose bridge. The Queen of Heaven smiled and nodded. Then she watched as the two holographic images disappeared. Chapter 223. The first volume of the Hell's Map in Li Onping's hand attracted all of his attention. The first level of the Hell's Map, the so-called blood body, was the foundation of everything. Through the entanglement of mental energy and soul power, one's spirit and body would purify the chaotic soul power in one sea of consciousness. Then, the soul power that was burned, tempered, and finally purified by mental energy would be poured into one's body. The entanglement of mental energy and soul power would fill one's entire body, to every inch of skin, every bone, and even every cell. This would allow Li Onping's will to completely reach every part of his body. Under such circumstances, although his physical fitness would not improve, it would allow Li Onping to have unimaginable control and insight over his body. For example, after cultivating the blood body, he could accelerate the secretion of adrenaline and increase his strength. He could accelerate the peristalsis of his stomach and enhance his digestive ability. As the cultivation of the blood body deepened, the integration of mental energy, soul, and body became better. Li Onping could even observe his body at the cellular level. Ordinary diseases and terminal illnesses could be cured without using any soul power. He could control his own cells to recover. At this point, the cultivation of the Hell's Map's first level of the blood body was almost complete. After that, he could learn the last 6 levels of the first volume of the Hell's Map. The blood body was the foundation of the last 6 systems. Only after cultivating the blood body could one improve one's body according to the theories of the last 6 systems. Therefore, the blood body did not improve one's physical fitness. Li Onping relied on his 4th level mental energy and huge soul accumulation to break through all the levels of the blood body in one go and complete the cultivation of the first level. However, this was just the beginning for the Hell's Map. Li Onping looked at the contents of the last 6 systems in his mind. The more he looked, the more amazed he was. Rather than calling the cultivation of the 6 major systems secret martial arts, it was more like a systematic science. Using all kinds of unimaginable methods to transform the body, the cultivator's body was made into a monster that could adapt to all kinds of environments and grow infinitely. However, compared to the conclusions obtained directly, there were more theories about the soul and the body. These theories far exceeded the understanding of the human body in modern society. As for the part of the soul, it was completely unknown to humans. Even though Li Onping's brain was filled with these theories, he still could not understand most of them. However, one thing was certain. In comparison, Li Onping's method of using soul power to strengthen his body was simple and crude to the extreme. He immediately thought of Black. This method of using soul energy to directly strengthen the body was all taught by Black. So, does Black know anything about the Hell's Map? Li Onping had no way of knowing the answer now. However, he understood that regardless of whether Black knew about the Hell's Map or not, it was normal for Black not to tell him. Besides, Ever since he met Black, she had been hiding too many things from him. However, no matter how one looked at it, the Hell's Map seemed to be related to the demon race. It was obvious that only demons could activate the map. Li Onping was only able to absorb the knowledge in it because he was modified by Black's ability. Therefore, he believed that the theory about the body and the soul belonged to the demons. Black should know about it too. It was just that she did not tell Li Onping. Obviously, it was the opposite of what Black said. Black did not want Li Onping to become too powerful. Especially if Li Onping followed the method that Black taught him, there would be a huge bottleneck before he could reach the 5th energy level. According to the theory described in the Hell's Map, once the transformation of the 6 major systems was completed, the body would be completely liberated. There would no longer be a so-called limit. The utilization of soul energy would also reach a new high. Li Onping was getting more excited the more he looked at it. He could not wait to transform his body according to the theory in the map. Unfortunately, the transformation of the 6 major systems in the Hell's Map was not an easy task. Li Onping needed time to learn and absorb the knowledge in it. Only then could he slowly complete the transformation of his body. However, the method that Li Onping came up with to break through to the 5th energy level was obviously more promising and powerful than the one in the Hell's Map. Thinking time always passed quickly. Li Onping was immersed in the shocking knowledge in the Hell's Map. Yelu Mengxiang and Fang Yuelin could only wait. They looked at Li Onping staring blankly at the scroll in his hand. They did not dare to disturb him. He stood by Li Onping's side and waited quietly. However, the two of them didn't expect to wait for more than 2 hours. Fang Yuelin had been roaming the world for many years. She had been training. After waiting for 2 hours, she was just a little impatient. However, Yelu Mengxiang was just an ordinary person who lived like a princess, especially when Fang Yong tried to force the emperor to abdicate. She had been in a standoff with the Praetorian guards. Later, she was taken to the prison. Whether it was his spirit or his body, he had consumed a lot of energy. After waiting for another 2 hours, she was very tired. However, looking at Li Onping, it seemed that he had not moved for 2 hours. He was still in the same position, staring at the Hell's Map in his hand. Seeing that Li Onping still had no intention of stopping, Yelu Mengxiang finally could not help but call out, "Sir." Seeing that Li Onping did not respond, she gathered her courage and called out again, "Sir?" "HM." Li Onping turned his head. The joy in his eyes had been deeply hidden. He looked at Yelu Mengxiang indifferently. Yelu Mengxiang lowered her head and said, "Sir, it has been a long time. If it is too long, I am worried that there will be changes inside and outside the palace." Li Onping frowned and put away the Hell's Map. "I know. Let's go." He had only brought the Hell's Map with him because he had already memorized the contents of the other 16 secret martial arts manuals in his mind. The Hell's Map was too special. He decided to bring it with him. As for the stone on the 2nd floor of the palace treasury, he asked Yelu Mengxiang to give it to the Xia's delegation and let them take it back to the 8th Research Institute. After returning to the surface, Li Onping did not care about Yelu Mengxiang and the others. He directly jumped back to the imperial study. Looking at the dejected Fang Yong, it was clear that Fang Yong was at a complete disadvantage against Fang Yuhuang and was completely suppressed. At this time, Li Onping directly said to Fang Yuhuang about the Hell's Map, "You will take over Baiyue and do these things. First, let Baiyue join my Pan-Continent Alliance. Second, execute Fang Yong and everyone related to the nuclear explosion. Third, clean up all League of Stars forces in Baiyue. After doing these 3 things, you will hand over the management of Baiyue to Yelu Mengxiang and Fang Yuelin. Hurry up and come to Tianjing to help me." "I understand." Fang Yuhuang nodded. As for how Yelu Mengxiang and Fang Yuelin would manage Baiyue, Li Onping would naturally leave it to Wang Chong and the others. After all, 100 Dragon Sparrow Guards and a group of Xia officials would gradually come to Baiyue. They would help Yelu Mengxiang transform Baiyue and implement Li Onping's ideas. They would weaken the power of the nobles and the royal family, increase the status and opportunities of ordinary people, and see the entire country's wealth gap. They would rely on the power of the dragon sparrow guards to clean up a large part of society. Perhaps there would be some pain in the beginning, but after Baiwe gradually got on the right track and got used to its status as a member of the Pan-Continent Alliance, Li Onping believed it would get better and better. Next, Li Onping gave a few more orders and had Fang Yuhuang withdraw the 33 Heavens domain around the palace. The army immediately rushed in. However, Li Onping had already left the palace to call back the scattered dragon sparrow guards. Next, Fang Yuhuang returned to the throne. Based on the power he and Li Onping had shown before, and the fact that he was a member of the Baiwe royal family, he had absolute prestige among the higher-ups of Baiwe. Fang Yuhuang easily suppressed the situation and regained control of the Baiwe country's power. In the next few months, he used his absolute power and strong methods, combined with Dxia's power, to carry out a vigorous reform. Not only did he let Baiwe join the Pan-Continent Alliance established by Li Onping, but he also greatly reduced the power of the nobles, loosened the class structure in Baiwe country, and cleaned up a few foreign powers, including the League of Stars, so Baiwe country gradually got on the right track. However, all of this was just the beginning. Not only Baiwe, but even Dxia was still far from Li Onping's ideal country. While the Bayou country was busy inside and outside the imperial palace, Li Onping, Scorpion, Xiao Xuesu, and the others were secretly arranged by Fang Yuhuang to take a special plane to Tianjin. Chapter 224. When Li Onping took a special plane back to Tianjin, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. However, Li Onping, who got off the plane, was still in high spirits. Originally, with his physical fitness, he would be fine even if he didn't sleep for 10 days or half a month. So when he got off the plane, he immediately rushed to the 8th Research Institute with the Hell's Map and the Meat Stone. Li Onping first took the time to harvest some of the clones that he had stored during the 10 days he was away. The nuclear explosion and the cultivation of the first level of the Hell's Map consumed a lot of Li Onping's spiritual energy. After replenishing more than 100,000 units of soul force, an electronic door opened, and Sherwin walked in energetically. The whole room was full of countless intact corpses, but Sherwin had long been accustomed to this. He stepped over the sea of corpses and walked towards Li Onping. "What do you mean by giving us a stone? There are a lot of things to do in the Institute. If you want to study the stone, you should go to those archaeologists." Although Li Onping's power was getting stronger and stronger, and almost no one dared to talk to him casually, Sherwin was like a mad scientist immersed in research. He didn't know if he was slow or just didn't care. The way he spoke was almost the same as when he first met Li Onping. Li Onping smiled. Usually, the people around him were all subservient to him. Only a few people like Sherwin would speak to him in such a normal manner. "That's not an ordinary stone. That thing should be the flesh and blood of some kind of creature." "How is that possible?" Sherwin didn't believe it. "We tested it as soon as you brought it over. It's carbonate, calcium silicate, and some silica. It can't be a living thing at all." "I don't know about this," Li Onping said with a serious face. "In short, what I can assure you is that this thing is definitely from some kind of creature. It should be a small part of the body of that creature. As for how to confirm, study, and even restore it, it's up to you." After that, he ignored the puzzled Sherwin and directly left the 8th Research Institute. It was already more than 3 o'clock in the morning when he walked out of the institute. Li Onping found that a row of cars had been waiting at the door, and Wang Yin was standing outside the car looking at him. Clearly, Xiao Xuesu was too tired and had already gone to rest. Therefore, the one following behind Li Onping was Wang Yin, the proud daughter of the Wang family. Li Onping naturally didn't dislike having them follow him. In fact, most men probably wouldn't hate having a beautiful woman with a strong background, unparalleled beauty, and talent following behind his butt. At least it was pleasing to the eye when he was bored. The old fellows of the 9 great royal families had also seen through this, which was why they had the beauties sent out by the royal families to follow Li Onping in turns. It would be best if she could have an intimate relationship with Li Onping. That was what they wanted to see the most. Wang Yin saw Li Onping coming out and said nervously, "Sir, Where are we going next? Lianping looked at the dark night sky and said casually, I'm going back to the palace by myself. You don't have to follow me. By the way, Lianping looked at Wang Yin in front of him and said, help me buy some books. Books? Wang Yin wondered. Yes, books. Lianping thought for a while and said, first of all, give me a copy of all the textbooks of the medical profession in the university. Also, bring me a copy of all the textbooks related to biology, genes, the human body, and these. Wang Yin was surprised. All of them? Do you want all the textbooks? Well, all of them. Lianping nodded. You can buy them as soon as possible and send them to the palace. Seeing Wang Yin nodding foolishly, Lianping didn't care how she would complete the task and directly flew in the direction of the palace. Seeing Lianping leaving through the night sky, Wang Yin immediately took out her mobile phone and made a call. Hello. Well, I know. He wants all the medical textbooks as well as textbooks on genes, the human body, and biology. Well, the more the better. I think it's best to send him all the basic textbooks from the most cutting-edge papers. Okay, I understand. At 3 o'clock in the morning, countless people were woken up from their beds. There were also dozens of famous domestic biology and medicine professors who were woken up by their superiors in the middle of the night to answer questions about the selection of textbooks. The top universities, magazines, and periodicals in the country of Great Xia sorted out a list of relevant professional papers overnight and sent the electronic versions of the contents of those papers to Wang Yin. Thousands of people were mobilized, and in a short period of time, a batch of the best and most comprehensive textbooks on medicine, biology, and the human body were sent to the palace. On the other hand, the Xia Dragonfinch sent Momo to personally compile those excellent papers and establish a special database and an internal palace website. All of this was because of Lianping's words. From beginning to end, no one even asked Lianping why. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, everything was completed. Wang Yin gently opened the door of the palace study and saw Lianping sitting cross-legged on the ground, holding a huge picture scroll in his hand and looking at it. Even when Wang Yin walked in front of him, he didn't raise his head. Lianping suddenly said, Is it all done? Wang Yin was shocked and said, Well, because there are too many textbooks, they're all placed outside the study. I also asked someone to organize an excellent paper and article on relevant majors. They are all here. With that said, Wang Yin handed a tablet in her hand to Lianping, and a paper search interface opened on it. It could be searched by difficulty, major, direction, initials, year of publication, author, and so on. Lianping clicked a few times and showed a satisfied smile. He put the tablet on the ground and walked out of the study. Lianping's knowledge of the human body, medicine, and biology was only at the level of an ordinary college student. These papers looked amazing even though he didn't understand them. He would wait until he had a certain foundation before reading them. So his initial goal was still to read textbooks. When he opened the door, he saw 10 rows of bookshelves in the open space outside the study. A variety of carefully selected textbooks were placed on them. Wang Yin on the side explained, Sir, where do you plan to put these books? Don't move. Lianping pulled out a medical biology book and read it. Just put it here, it won't take long. Yes. Wang Yin saw Lianping standing in front of the bookshelf and reading, so she silently retreated. Lianping's speed of flipping through the book was very fast. It was as if he was reading 10 lines at a glance. He was like a scanner, sweeping the contents of the book into his brain. This was also the reason why he said it wouldn't take long. His first step was not to understand it, but to memorize all the medical, biological, and human knowledge in front of him into his brain. Because his purpose was not to invent or create, he wanted to thoroughly understand the knowledge in the Hell Map. So the contents of these textbooks were all for him to build a foundation. With his current reading speed, it would take him 4 or 5 days to finish reading all the textbooks in front of him. Wang Yin on the side waited and prepared some tea and snacks for Lianping from time to time. However, Lianping was very focused on reading the book and basically didn't eat those things. Time passed unknowingly. When the sun began to set in the sky, Lianping put the Human Anatomy book back on the bookshelf. This book had more than 600 pages, and it introduced all the structures of the human body in detail. Because it was purely memory-related knowledge, Li Onping was able to master it after reading it once. After understanding the structure of the human body in detail, he even felt that his blood body, which had already been completed, seemed to have improved. With a better understanding of the structure of the human body, he seemed to be closer to controlling his own body. Li Onping's face showed a trace of satisfaction. It seemed that learning the basic knowledge first, and then learning the content of the hell map was the right thing to do. Looking at Wang Yin, who was yawning, Li Onping said, "Tell Wang Chong and Lu Sheng to come over." Wang Yin was stunned, but the next moment, she immediately woke up and said yes. After that, she lowered her head and dialed the phone. Li Onping thought, the agreement with the God Realm is still more than half a month away. It's time to make arrangements. Also, the League of Stars plotted against him in the Bayou country. He didn't plan to let them off so easily. That night, the League of Stars branch in Donyang City received an email from the Xia Dragonfinch. "I'm Li Onping. All the forces of the League of Stars will withdraw from Donyang City in 15 days. In the future, this place will be under my control." Chapter 225. On the same day, the Dongyang government also received a notice from the Xia's government. In 30 days, Li Onping would personally visit Dongyang. When the news came out, Dongyang was shocked. But what made the Dongyang government even more uneasy was that the members of the League of Stars in Dongyang began to evacuate in large numbers. Dongyang was a country that completely relied on the League of Stars. Almost half of the government's upper echelons were controlled by the League of Stars. This country was practically the League of Stars' bridgehead in the eastern continent. But now, they were suddenly evacuating. This kind of abandonment, coupled with the news of Li Onping's personal visit, made everyone in Dongyang feel even more uneasy. Li Onping also felt like he had punched empty air. He didn't think that the League of Stars would directly retreat in the face of his provocation. They seemed to be giving up Dongyang and letting Li Onping do whatever he wanted. This kind of strange action was obviously not in line with the League of Stars' previous domineering style. And to say that they were intimidated by Li Onping's strength, Li Onping didn't believe it. Because the League of Stars had the world's only level 6 ability user, the Queen of Heaven, and an unknown number of level 5 ability users. Even the current Li Onping wasn't completely confident that he could defeat them. The only thing that was certain was that once the Xia Dragonfinch and the League of Stars went to war, the entire eastern and western continents would most likely be involved in a terrible war. No matter which side it was, they would suffer heavy losses. So now, the two sides were secretly accumulating strength while maintaining restraint. Although the two sides didn't communicate, they naturally had a tacit understanding. But this time, the League of Stars secretly sent nuclear warheads to the 100 countries, which clearly crossed the line. So Li Onping directly asked for an exorbitant price and wanted to go to Dongyang. But he didn't expect the League of Stars to withdraw without a word. The Xia Dragonfinch definitely wouldn't believe that there wasn't a conspiracy behind this. But compared to the above important news, in the capital of Dongyang, some magical urban legends began to gradually spread. Stories about metahumans, ancient legends, and immortality. Although the content of the story was absurd, it was as if there was an invisible hand adding fuel to the fire, causing this rumor to gradually spread. At the foot of Mount Fuji, in a pavilion, the new king was slowly wiping the katana in his hand. His focused eyes and gentle movements made it seem as if he wasn't wiping a katana, but rather treating a lover. The white-haired elder at the side was not surprised and said to him, "The battlefield has been prepared and the bait has been released. We only need to wait for the chosen one to come." The new emperor stopped wiping and looked at his reflection on the snow-white blade. "Isn't it too hasty to have all of them come here at once?" The old man smiled and said, "It's all thanks to what Li Onping did in 100 Moons that the situation is moving in our favor. Whether it is the League of Stars, the Annihilation Abyss, or the Imaginary Organization, their actions are all under my control." And from Li Onping's performance in 100 Moons this time, He is indeed the best candidate for an absolute ability user. Together with the other candidates, the revival of the divine realm is already inevitable. The old man's tone carried a sense of inevitability. The new king sheathed his katana and placed it on the rack, sighing, "It's a pity that Shang Junhai is too heavily protected by the League of Stars. If only he could come here. There's no other way. His ability is too precious. The League of Stars will definitely not let him take the risk before he becomes a level 5 ability user." The old man smiled sinisterly, but as long as the plan is completed this time, after getting rid of Li Onping and the others, even if Shang Junhai becomes a level 5 ability user, he won't be able to turn the situation around. The human world will once again usher in an era of great unification. The new king's eyes revealed a sense of fanaticism. The era that belongs to us is coming. 6 days later, Tianjin University. In a corner of the campus park, Li Onping was the only one lying on the grass with a radius of 100 meters. He held a tablet in his hand and was constantly absorbing the knowledge within. In just 6 short days, he had studied for almost 24 hours without sleep and rest. He had almost achieved the learning goal that would take a normal person 4 or 5 years to achieve. In these 6 days, he didn't cultivate his mental energy or ability at all. He didn't train his body at all. He just kept reading and learning. But even so, Li Onping felt that his blood clone cultivation on the Hell's map had reached a peak. He already knew his own body like the back of his hand. Near the grass field where he was reading, there were people who wanted to come in from time to time or pass by, but they were all stopped by the surrounding staff members. These staff members disguised themselves as students, cleaners, campus security guards, and teachers, hiding near Li Onping. Of course, they weren't monitoring Li Onping, nor were they protecting Li Onping. They were preventing other people from getting close to Li Onping. In particular, they were preventing the second generation of officials, rich people, and playboys from getting close to Li Onping and offending him, causing unnecessary trouble. They knew that the King of Hell was easy to deal with, but the little demons were hard to deal with. What the 9 great royal families were most afraid of now was encountering such things. Therefore, although Li Onping had been reading in Tianjin University for the whole morning, no one could get close to him and talk to him. All unstable factors had been cleared before Li Onping arrived. Those who refused to comply were arrested and detained for 24 hours. Li Onping didn't care about them. After all, his every move now had a great impact. It didn't matter to him if it could make some old guys feel more at ease. After all, he came to Tianjin University to study on the grass field because he was tired of staying in the palace study for 6 days. He felt that his efficiency had dropped a little, so he wanted a change of environment. Just as Li Onping was reading, his ears suddenly twitched, and he heard a few muffled groans. He looked up and found a girl in sportswear rushing toward him. The girl was agile. Not only was she fast at running, but she also had amazing boxing skills. Her moves were as fast as thunder and as powerful as stormy waves, but they were also simple. No matter who was in front of her, she dealt with them with a straight punch or a side kick. Wherever she passed, the disguised staff members were thrown off their feet. Almost no one could block her punches and kicks. She didn't stop until she was 10 meters away from Li Onping. Behind her, a large group of staff members rushed over, and dozens of pistols of various sizes were pointed at the girl who stood still. Li Onping looked at the girl with interest and waved his hand, indicating that the staff members should leave. The girl had pink hair and a tall figure, about 1.75 meters. Her skin was a unique pale and delicate color. It was like ice and snow in the sky, although she was wearing white sportswear and had her hair tied up in a ponytail. It couldn't hide her beauty at all. It was a kind of beauty that made everyone who got close to her feel ashamed of their own inferiority. Even Li Onping's eyes couldn't help but flash a trace of admiration. He asked the girl, "Holy Princess? Claudia?" He paused and said, "You're good at fighting." "Of course, I got full marks in the royal family's combat class." The Holy Princess of the Ice Fortress, the next Empress of the Ice Fortress, was looking at Li Onping with a serious face. Li Onping didn't seem to see her serious face. He looked back at the tablet and said casually, "Why are you in such a hurry to find me?" Claudia frowned her delicate eyebrows, as if she wanted to express her anger. It was a pity that Li Onping wasn't looking. Even if Li Onping was looking, he would only find her cute even if she was angry. Generally, I arrived in Tianjing half a month ago. I came on behalf of the Ice Fortress. But you asked me to wait for you to come back from Baiwei. Then I waited, but I waited for 10 days. When you came back from Baiwei, you still didn't see me and announced that you were going to Donyang. Then I waited for another week and decided to take the initiative to look for you. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see you until I die of old age. Li Onping looked at her indifferently and said, I don't plan to marry the Ice Fortress. If you came with this purpose, you can go to the 9 great royal families. They are very interested in this kind of thing. Claudia took a deep breath. Her eyes seemed to be spitting fire. She stared fiercely at Li Onping and punched his forehead. Chapter 2:26. Claudia's skills were already at the level of a master among normal people. But to Li Onping, this punch was no different from a child's play. He didn't even try to dodge and allowed Claudia's fist to land on his head. After this punch landed, Li Onping's body didn't move at all, as if a light breeze brushed past his face. On the contrary, Claudia's face turned pale, feeling a wave of pain coming from her right hand, as if she had punched a marble. Li Onping asked, Are you done venting? Claudia sighed and asked, What book are you reading? Some medical papers. Li Onping didn't raise his head from beginning to end. If it wasn't for the hint of admiration in his eyes when he first saw Claudia, Claudia would have suspected that her appearance had become ugly. Seeing that Claudia didn't say anything, Li Onping reminded her, In 10 minutes, I will leave here. No matter what you want to say, you only have 10 minutes at most. Claudia frowned, hesitated for a long time, and her eyes revealed a trace of struggle. She looked at Li Onping's indifferent expression, sighed, and said, You're right. The biggest reason I was sent here by Father is to unite with you through marriage. Pluto, Zhurong, and Blood Demon are all dead. White Short Star has joined the League of Stars. Now Ice Fortress doesn't have any level 5 ability users. Fire Dragon Vanguard is only a name. In this unconventional war, we are already at a complete disadvantage. We urgently need a strong reinforcement. Otherwise, even if other people don't attack us, just the imbalance of the 4 aristocratic families in the country is enough to cause internal strife. Claudia looked at Li Onping. Seeing that he was unmoved, she bit her lips and continued. Once we are united through marriage, Dexia will also have the strong support of our Ice Fortress. We can also join your Pan-Continent Alliance. When Claudia said this, it was clear that the internal strife within the Ice Fortress had become serious. Because Ivan II was one of the 4 great noble families, there weren't many awakened ability users in this generation. The other 3 great noble families were completely unrestrained after the Fire Dragon Vanguard was almost completely wiped out. In addition, after the Battle of Morocco, Ivan II's prestige was almost swept to the ground. Whether it was in the army or in the government, his support rate plummeted. In addition, the other 3 nobles joined forces to put pressure on Ivan II. Currently, Ivan II's control over the entire Ice Fortress had fallen to its lowest point in history. There was even a possibility that the entire empire would break apart. However, Li Onping remained silent as Claudia continued to talk about the benefits of their marriage. She looked at the other party's silent appearance and hardened her heart, saying, Are you worried that after I marry you, the power under you will be unbalanced? If you're willing to marry me, I don't mind sharing my husband with others. You can choose the women of Dexia's 9 great noble families and the female ability users of Dexia Dragonfinch at the same time. But before you choose, you must let me see. In this way, it will be very beneficial for you to control the power in your hands, right? And as a man, don't you want to start a harem? Li Onping looked at Claudia in surprise, then saw the other party's calm expression and felt relieved. Although the other party looked the same age as an ordinary girl. After all, she grew up in the Ice Fortress royal family, so her views on marriage were naturally different from ordinary women. He asked casually, You should be inheriting the throne, right? That's right. So you will nominally become the Prince of Ice Fortress. Claudia looked at Lianping's still uninterested expression and suddenly said hesitantly, Are you worried that I am spoiled and can't fulfill the responsibilities of a wife? Her face suddenly blushed. Actually, after I came of age, I already learned about the matters between husband and wife in the imperial palace. After saying this, Claudia's face was already completely red. After all, she was still young and inexperienced. The way he talked about his marriage was just a disguise. This was the first time she spoke about this kind of thing, so she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Lianping didn't reply. In fact, after Claudia's persuasion for so long, he really did start to consider the issue of marriage. His power was just too great, so great that all of his subordinates were afraid of him. This was especially true for the 9 great noble families and those nobles. On one hand, they obeyed Lianping, but on the other hand, they secretly feared Lianping and were on guard against Lianping. Before this society was completely reformed, this kind of thing was unavoidable. However, if it really was a marriage alliance, it would be with the 9 great noble families of the Xia, and even with many of the members of the Pan-Continent Alliance, such as the 100 Moons and Ice Fortress. This clearly had the effect of calming people's hearts. Lianping thought about it. In any case, the marriage alliance could be completely just a formality. However, it could play a role in stabilizing the situation and resolving conflicts when the alliance was just established and at the most turbulent time. Lianping thought about it, and finally his tone softened. If it's a marriage alliance, it's not completely out of the question. Really? Claudia looked at Lianping with a look of pleasant surprise, but in the next second, she seemed to realize that she was being too unreserved. She immediately put away her pleasantly surprised expression and said, Then let's keep it simple and start preparing immediately. I'll send a message back home. As she said this, she took out her phone. Lianping said, What's the rush? Even if I want to get married, I definitely won't just find you. I won't do it so casually. After all, Lianping's every move now would affect the international situation. If he wanted to get married, it would be a major event for the entire Eastern continent. Claudia's expression turned solemn. I was too abrupt. Thus, Lianping waved his hand in the distance. A staff member who was waiting in the distance ran over and bowed. Sir, do you have any instructions? Lianping said casually, Tell Wang Chong that it's not like I can't consider the marriage alliance. Tell them to show me the articles under the assumption that I agree to it. Claudia reminded at the side, Me too. Lianping added impatiently. Tell Wang Chong to include him in the hypothetical situation. Then, the staff member left with a shocked expression. At this moment, Claudia heard Lianping's tone softening, but didn't let down the excitement from before. She only felt that her heart was empty, as if something was missing. Lianping looked at Claudia, who was a little dazed, and said, Don't think too much. I'm just thinking about it. Moreover, a marriage alliance will at most treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. At least before the matter in Donyang is over, I won't make a decision. Even if it's really a marriage alliance, it's just in name. I won't care about your private life. We'll still live our own lives. However, Lianping felt that a marriage alliance with Claudia would indeed give him an excellent excuse to intervene in the affairs of the Ice Fortress. Claudia seemed to have relaxed at this moment. She sat beside Lianping and said softly, Then I'll spend more time with you during this period. Whether it's a marriage alliance or not, as the future queen of the Ice Fortress, it's not a bad thing to get to know each other. Lianping let her be. Although Claudia had a devastatingly beautiful face, coupled with her identity as the Holy King's daughter, she attracted the desire of countless men. However, in his eyes, she was just a girl, a candidate for marriage alliance. He lowered his head and looked at the paper in his hand again. After studying for this period of time, he felt that he had a certain foundation. Tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, he would be able to start some body modification experiments. However, the last 6 levels of the Hell's map corresponded to the 6 major systems. It didn't matter if it was first or last. There was no problem in trying any of them first. The respiratory system, digestive system, endocrine system, circulatory system, nervous system, and motor system. These 6 major systems were related to every aspect of the human body. However, some were difficult and some were easy to modify. In terms of improving combat power, the motor system would naturally improve Li Onping's combat power the most. The respiratory and digestive systems complemented each other and could lay an excellent foundation for later modifications. Li Onping hesitated for a while and finally decided to start with the respiratory system. After all, breathing was the beginning of human life and the basic condition for survival. Moreover, according to the knowledge in the Hell's Map, the respiratory system was easier to modify compared to the other 5 major systems. It was also suitable to be the first system to be modified. Chapter 227. In an underground laboratory in the 8th Research Institute, there was no one around. There was only Li Onping lying naked on a highly intelligent operating table. The entire operating table was covered by a layer of glass to seal it and sterilize it. His right hand was placed on the intelligent operating table, and a high-definition screen was hanging above his head, allowing him to see his chest even while lying flat. Under his control, a robotic arm was slowly cutting off his chest with a scalpel. However, when the scalpel came into contact with Li Onping's skin, it made an unpleasant sound of friction, as if a knife had stabbed into a rock. Li Onping turned the robotic arm's power to the maximum, but it only left a red mark on his chest. There was not even a trace of blood. Is that so? Li Onping looked at his chest on the monitor and revealed an expression of understanding. After all, with his current physical fitness, even wind blades at supersonic speeds would not hurt him at all. Even close-range machine gun shots would not be able to break his skin. Ordinary scalpels would not be able to cut his skin. However, Li Onping had expected this and was prepared. Under his control, the robotic arm retracted back to the operating table under him. A few seconds later, it stretched out again. However, this time, the scalpel in the robotic arm's hand had become a dark red knife. This was a high-frequency scalpel. The high-frequency scalpel was originally used in medicine and industry. This highly intelligent operating table was naturally equipped with it. Under Li Onping's control, the high-frequency scalpel directly cut into Li Onping's chest, drawing a perfect straight line on his skin. However, this line of blood quickly disappeared. Under the powerful regenerative ability, the wound healed in less than a second. As Li Onping used his soul power to regenerate his body time and time again, this had almost become an instinct of his. Now, he had to restrain this instinct again. The scalpel cut down again, but this time, under Li Onping's intentional control, the body did not regenerate again. A long wound appeared on Li Onping's chest. Following his manipulation, his entire lung was gradually exposed to the air. It could be clearly seen that every time Li Onping breathed, his lungs would contract once. Breathing was a basic characteristic of all living creatures known to mankind. Low-level creatures use their cell membranes to directly exchange gases with the outside world. High-level creatures, on the other hand, had evolved organs responsible for breathing. The more advanced a creature was, the more responsible its respiratory system was. Different creatures had different respiratory systems due to different environments. For example, humans moved on land, but fish could breathe in the water. What was recorded in the Hell's Map was a breathing system known as the abyss breathing technique. The ultimate goal of this respiratory system was to overcome all environmental influences and be able to exchange gas with the outside world in any environment. Whether it was carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, or even poisonous gases, they could all be absorbed through the abyssal breathing technique. They could even breathe freely in the lungs of the earth. Unless there was a complete vacuum around a living being, any gas could be absorbed, broken down, and eventually turned into nutrients for the body. In addition, this breathing system was very complex. In addition to the role of gas exchange, it also greatly enhanced the lungs' strength, sense of smell, and ability to hold one's breath. However, the abyssal breathing technique was so powerful that it was obviously not easy to complete it. In fact, Li Onping did not think that it could be completed in one try. Li Onping, who was on the operating table, was controlling his psychic qi, soul energy, and mechanical arms at the same time to change the basic structure of the lungs bit by bit. Every cell inside relied on Li Onping's blood clone to slowly combine with his psychic qi. As a result, Li Onping's cells had undergone a fundamental change, giving him supernatural attributes. This was also the basis of the Hell's Map's physical training and physical transformation. It was important to know that psychic qi was something that was difficult to observe with technology. Ordinary people could not see it. It was a type of supernatural power. This was because it was the product of the combination of the body and the mind. What Li Onping was doing now was just like how half of his psychic qi represented the body and the other half represented the mind. He used the physical half of his psychic qi to combine his psychic qi with his cells. Then, he used the psychic qi to represent the mind to make his cells have a certain attribute of the mind. This caused Li Onping's cells to begin to have the characteristics of the mind. What was a mind? As the saying went, the bigger the heart, the bigger the world. The mind had no limits to begin with. It was detached from the physical world. However, now, because of their abilities, humans were able to understand the mental world and even gave birth to psychic qi. This allowed all aptitude users' psychic qi to interfere with the physical world. The method in the Hell's Map was based on psychic qi and was cultivated through the blood clone. The control of the body cells was combined with the combination of the two. After all, as long as it was a living creature, the body had its limits. If one wanted to improve the body to limitless possibilities, they had to give it the attribute of the mind and break the barrier between the two. Where the mind was, the body would go. However, the body existed in the real world after all. Even if it had a part of the attribute of the mind, it could not be as changeable as a human's mind. Therefore, after the cells and psychic qi were combined, the new cells still had to exist in a relatively fixed structure. Therefore, the combination was only the first step. After the combination, it brought new plasticity to the cells and the body. Completely transforming the body was the next step. If an aptitude user was in the laboratory, he would be able to sense that Li Onping's psychic qi was disappearing at an alarming speed on the operating table. This was a price to pay for combining psychic qi with the cells. It required an astonishing amount of psychic qi. One must know that this was not a simple matter of pouring psychic qi into the cells. It was a complete and permanent combination. How much power did it require to break the barrier between the physical world and the mental world for the cells and the body? Moreover, he also needed to maintain his concentration at all times to maintain the cellular level of control over his body. At the same time, he also had to operate the mechanical arm and use a special method to inject the specially prepared nutrient solution into his lungs to feed the new cells. Because the combination of psychic qi and the cells had a part of the mind attribute, it required more energy to maintain the cells on a daily basis. Therefore, while combining psychic qi, a large amount of nutrient solution had to be injected. Li Onping spent about 2 hours to completely deplete the psychic qi in his body. However, his brows were tightly knitted together. After spending so much effort, he realized that the modification was only the size of a fingernail. Moreover, he had only modified the attributes of the cells. Even the structure of the lungs had not changed. It's more troublesome than I thought. Li Onping thought to himself, is it because my body is too strong and the energy required to modify the cells is especially high? If I'm only at the first energy level, it should be much easier to modify the cells. As expected, the knowledge recorded in the Hell's Map should be used at the first energy level. I should even start learning when I'm at level 0. As Li Onping operated the operating table and sewed up his chest cavity and sprayed disinfectant on it, he thought of another problem. There's another troublesome thing. These replacement cells do indeed possess astonishing vitality and plasticity. However, my body hasn't been completely modified yet. In other words, when these cells disappear, the regenerated cells will be the same as before. These new cells can survive for a long time, so I don't have to worry about natural replacement for the time being. However, I can't let the modified parts get injured easily. Once they get injured and regenerate, the cells will be replaced and return to their original state. Therefore, before the cells are completely replaced and modified, I have to avoid getting injured and using ultra-rapid regeneration. Thinking of this, Li Onping snorted. Looks like I have to be careful when I go to Danyang this time. However, Li Onping did not really take it to heart. After all, there was still a month's time. He was confident that he could at least finish modifying his respiratory system. Moreover, even if he could not use ultra-rapid regeneration, how many people on this land could be his match? How many people could injure him? Seeing that the wound on his chest had completely healed, Li Onping sat up, opened the glass cover outside the operating table, and walked out. At the same time, waves of psychic energy came from the distant south to help Li Onping recover his psychic energy. This was the effect of the psychic energy incarnation. The connection between Li Onping and his psychic energy incarnation had transcended physical barriers. This was something Li Onping had confirmed before sending his psychic energy incarnation out. Otherwise, he would not have left his incarnation so casually beside the Baiyu King. Not only could he control his incarnation from a distance, but he could also let his incarnation recover his psychic energy from a distance. He could even summon his psychic energy incarnation from thousands of kilometers away from the Baiyu country. Chapter 228. For the next few days, Li Onping stayed in the laboratory almost every day. He did not step out of the laboratory at all. He modified his respiratory system bit by bit. When he used up his qi, he would focus on recovering. When he recovered, he would go to the operating table. With his superhuman energy and terrifying willpower that had walked the line between life and death countless times, Li Onping's modification speed was faster than he had imagined. After spending a total of 5 days, Li Onping had completed the modification of the new cells in his lungs. The moment he was done, he took a deep breath. He felt as if the entire laboratory was trembling. His powerful lungs sucked in almost all the air in the room and released it in the next moment. The air hit the wall and made a crackling sound. After taking a deep breath, Li Onping felt that the qi and blood in his body seemed to have stabilized a little. This was before the modification of the entire lung structure was completed. The power of the abyss breathing technique, or rather, the Hell's Map, was evident. However, after Li Onping completed this step, he had to protect his lungs well in future battles. If he was injured and regenerated, the new cells would be replaced. All his previous efforts would be in vain. At least before the modification of the 6 major systems was completed, he had to avoid injuries in the modified areas. Otherwise, all his previous efforts would be in vain. However, after the modification of the various parts of the body was completed, the strength and adaptability of the modified body would be amazing. It would not be so easy to get injured. Li Onping thought about this while lying on the bed with his eyes closed. A wave of sleepiness came from his brain. Ever since he arrived in Baiyu country, he had not slept for more than 20 days. All kinds of battles, learning, research, and modification. He just wanted to have a good sleep now. Li Onping lay on the operating table and fell asleep. When he woke up, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning, 5 hours later. He thought about it and turned on his phone to see if there were any messages. After all, before he entered the laboratory, he had completely sealed off the place so that no one could disturb him. However, when he turned on his phone, hundreds of messages popped up. Among them, there were messages from Lu Sheng, Li Qian, and Xiao Xuesu. However, most of the messages were from Claudia. Li Onping hadn't read much when someone called him. Lu Sheng's voice sounded, "Sir, something has happened. We need to seek your opinion." Li Onping asked, "Where are you?" "The base's conference room." "I'll be right there." At the next moment, a strong gust of wind blew through the laboratory, and Li Onping disappeared. In the security room of the 8th Research Institute, the guards who were watching the surveillance videos were suddenly shocked. They saw a black shadow flashing in more than half of the surveillance videos at the same time. The guards immediately panicked and called the supervisor. When Li Onping flew into the sky from the exit of the 8th Research Institute, a small commotion began inside the institute. It wasn't until the surveillance footage was slowed down more than 100 times that Li Onping's blurry figure appeared on the screen that the riot stopped. As for Li Onping, he had already streaked across the sky and arrived at the Xiaolong K base's conference room. As soon as he entered the conference room, he realized that not only was Lu Sheng there, but there was also Yang Guang, Lu Feng, and even Antero from the Secret Service. When Li Onping walked into the conference room like a gust of wind, the three of them stood up at the same time. "Sir," Lu Sheng shouted. "What's going on?" Li Onping didn't stand on ceremony and asked directly. Lu Sheng pressed a button, and a video started playing on the projector in the conference room. On the streets, hundreds of people were shouting and demonstrating. The banners they held up read, "Give me back my freedom." Some even wrote "Butcher" or "Executioner." There were also some people holding up portraits of Li Onping. They had made Li Onping ugly by drawing 2 devil horns or a pig snout. "Are they protesting against me? Just disperse them. Why are you asking me this?" Li Onping frowned and looked at Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng smiled bitterly. "This is just the beginning." Then, as he played the video, he explained, "At first, only a small number of people objected to your actions in Baiwei. They thought that it was too cruel. However, most people still felt that you had promoted the country's prestige. But then something happened in Jadeite City." Li Onping frowned again. "I've already set the tone for the Jadeite City incident, haven't I? Clean it up completely and won't compromise. But there are many cases that are difficult to convict. The criminals also have reasons to be pitted. In addition, you increased the sentence for the Jadeite City cleanup operation." So, Lu Sheng was in a difficult position. Li Onping thought for a moment and asked, "What's the fuse?" "Mainly 2 cases," Lu Sheng said. "One is a minor member of the Loyalty Hall called Yu Cha. He hacked a middle-aged woman to death. The second case is a citizen called Hai Sheng who accidentally killed a hoodlum when he resisted a robbery. According to the standards you set, we were supposed to execute the minor in the first case and release the citizen in the second case without charge. However, we encountered some pressure." With that, Lu Sheng clicked again and another video started to play on the projection. It seemed to be from a TV program. Tian Haowen was facing the camera and saying passionately, "Yu Cha was a 14-year-old boy. Everyone, think about what you were doing when you were 14. What about Yu Cha?" In order to treat his mother's illness, he stepped into society early. He suffered the coldness of the world and was looked down upon by people. Why would such a filial and sensible boy be so agitated that he hacked someone to death? Have you thought about it? That middle-aged woman called Yi was a well-known shrew in the area. It wasn't the first time she insulted Yu Cha. The long period of pressure, the heavy burden of life, and Yi Wen's insults caused this tragedy. However, we shouldn't vent our anger on a 14-year-old boy. The real cause of this tragedy is the lack of a social system. It's the responsibility of the government. Yu Cha is just a minor child. He shouldn't have to bear such heavy pressure. Another video followed. It was the same program, but this time, Tian Haowen had changed his clothes. It seemed like it was not the same day as the previous one. He stood in front of the camera and said fiercely, "I can only say that Hai Sheng's self-defense this time is laughable." Li Onping frowned and fast-forwarded to the next video. The camera quickly played what Tian Haowen said. "He is 185 meters tall, and the victim is only 162 meters tall. He subdued his opponent and still used his fist to punch the victim. Let's look at his past. In the past 10 years, he was detained by the local police 7 times. Haha, according to him, all 7 times were so-called righteous acts. Everyone, I have never been afraid to suspect a person with the most sinister intentions. For example, Hai Sheng, who has been righteous acts for many years, lives in a 3-story villa and has a history of 2 marriages. Both of his wives were better off financially than him. According to his junior high school teacher, he liked to fight since he was a child. After the case, the local police station, unclear, Wordplay. Li Onping pressed a button and paused the video. The projection stopped at Tian Haowen's agitated face. Li Onping asked, "Is what he said true?" He covered up part of the truth to gain sympathy for Yu Cha and discredited Hai Sheng. However, his behavior of challenging the government is very popular among some people. Li Onping interrupted Lu Sheng and said, "Give me the case information." Yang Guang, who was standing by the side, passed 2 documents over. "Are you sure it wasn't tampered with?" Yang Guang said seriously, "It was confirmed by the intelligence network in the base. There is absolutely nothing that deviates from the truth." Li Onping nodded and looked at the information in the folder. He skimmed through 10 lines at a glance and spent less than a minute browsing through the entire case. It was basically the same as Lu Sheng's summary at the beginning. He said directly, "One killed and the other released." "Is there a problem? You still have to ask me?" Cold sweat dripped from the heads of the 3 people. In fact, since Li Onping entered the room, the 3 people seemed to have difficulty breathing. It was as if the air in the room had become thin. Li Onping became more and more unpredictable in their hearts. However, they didn't know that this was because Li Onping had just completed the new cell transformation in his lungs. His lung power was too strong, and he didn't pay attention to controlling it. As a result, he absorbed too much air, causing the air in the closed conference room to become thin. At this moment, Li Onping's question immediately made the 3 of them feel a wave of pressure. Lu Sheng said hesitantly, "That's how the 2 criminals were sentenced. But what about Tian Haowen? He recently brought a large group of supporters to Jadeite City. There are many private and foreign media outlets reporting on this matter." After saying that, Lu Sheng played another video. In the video, Tian Haowen was wearing a t-shirt and holding a megaphone. He was shouting at the front of the demonstration. They were all slogans such as "Give us back our freedom," "Tyrant, release all the miners." In fact, during this period of time, the storm in Jadeite City had almost swept through the entire Xia internet. Tian Haowen relied on playing the sympathy card for many of the suspects to weaken the facts of their crimes. Coupled with the pictures of a few good-looking suspects, he gained a large number of supporters. In the video, he was shouting, "This is tyranny. Our phone calls and internet are all being monitored. We have long lost our privacy." Now, he wants to use the law to strangle us step by step, reducing our freedom step by step, and finally completely controlling our lives. I just want to tell him that we will never compromise. Chapter 229. Turning off the video, Li Onping threw a cold glance at Lu Sheng and the others, saying slowly, "Do you still need me to teach you what to do?" Seeing that everyone's faces were turning paler and paler under the pressure of his gaze, Li Onping spoke again. "First, seal off the news. Get those private and foreign media to scram out of Jadeite City and confiscate all the content they filmed. Get Momo to take action and steal Tian Haowen's and his subordinates' Weibo accounts. Send people to reorganize the content and reverse the public opinion. As for Tian Haowen himself, he has already crossed the line. Capture him. If he refuses to compromise, then brainwash him. As for those backbones under him, let the Wang clan do it." Among the 9 great royal clans, the Wang clan had the strongest ability to manipulate people's minds. The best among them could even create fake memories and identities for ordinary people, subtly changing a person's personality. Although this ability had weaker effects on the more powerful an ability user was, it was very suitable to be used to protect one's rule. They were the strongest clan among the 9 great royal clans. If they were allowed to do as they wished, it wouldn't be strange for someone like Tian Haowen to become Li Onping's diehard loyalist. After saying this, Li Onping glared at them once again and said, "Don't test my determination. Unless I change my orders on my own accord, all of my orders must be strictly carried out." A cold gleam flashed in Li Onping's eyes, as if he had recalled his past. He spoke in a tone as if he was preaching, "I want to kill every single evil person in Xia. I want to make everyone who has done evil to hide under their bed and tremble." I want to make every single evil person who hasn't been punished to wake up from their nightmares every day. I want to make them feel terrified at the thought of doing evil. I want to make them panic like stray dogs the moment they pull the trigger. Every word Li Onping said sounded extremely righteous. However, for some reason, when they came out of his mouth, they gave off a feeling of evil that penetrated deep into one's bones. It was like the whispers of a demon, but also like the preaching of an evil god. This was how Lu Sheng and the others felt when they heard this. In fact, the Xia Dragonfinch had many ways to deal with a normal person like Tian Haowen. The reason why they waited until Li Onping came out of the laboratory was that they wanted to confirm the method that Li Onping wanted to use to do this. Secondly, even they felt that although Li Onping's intentions were good, it seemed a bit radical. Therefore, they wanted to confirm Li Onping's determination through Tian Haowen's matter. Now, that Li Onping had clearly displayed his unyielding attitude, Lu Sheng and the others would naturally do as he wished. Next, the topic turned to the daily construction of the Xia Dragonfinch, the preparations for the Pan-Continent Alliance, and so on. Lu Sheng and the others also reported on the current development. As the existence of ability users became more and more transparent in Xia, and Li Onping's shocking performance several times, most people in Xia had already accepted the existence of such extraordinary human beings. As for whether they were friends or enemies of ability users, it was completely different. Some people were friendly, some were fearful, and some were disgusted. This was all within Li Onping's expectations. Therefore, Lu Feng had always been in charge of the promotion of ability users. This was to let normal people gradually accept ability users, accept them, and treat them like normal people. However, this was obviously a slow process. It was because they had completely acknowledged the existence of ability users and promoted the Xia Dragonfinch. Recently, more and more ability users had come to Tianjing, wanting to join the Xia Dragonfinch. Most of them were weak, or had awakened their abilities not long ago, or were ill-informed. They had been hiding their abilities before and were not aware of the existence of other ability users. They all came to the Xia Dragonfinch, hoping to find companions and a sense of identity. There was also a small portion of them who were already quite famous before they came and were familiar with the existence of metahumans. After witnessing the power that Li Onping displayed, they hoped to join the great Xia Dragonfinch and ride on his coattails. There were even a few scammers who wanted to pretend to be ability users to fight for the Xia Dragonfinch's benefits. However, they were all caught and sent back. There were also many abilities that were of little value and were almost useless. Lu Sheng had them register their information and go home directly. Even so, in the past month, the Xia Dragonfinch had increased the number of ability users by more than 500. Currently, they were all receiving training, teaching them how to cultivate their abilities and how to abide by the Xia Dragonfinch's rules. It was believed that as time passed, the number of ability users in the Xia Dragonfinch would increase, and they would gradually enter a period of explosive growth. Following this, they talked about the Academy City. Li Onping chose the location of the Academy City to be near the Zhongdu. The main reason was that it was close to the center of the Xia, so the geographical location was not bad. The construction teams and supplies that the League of Stars had promised had all arrived, and the entire Academy City was ready to start construction. At this point, Lu Sheng took out a document and handed it to Li Onping, saying, "Sir, these are the 3 design plans for the Academy City. We're somewhat unsure, so please help us choose." When Li Onping heard this, he received the document with interest and began to look through it. The 3 design plans for the Academy City represented 3 different styles. The first was completely militarized. The entire Academy City would be built into something like a military fortress. There would be weapons of war and military training facilities everywhere, and the ability users who entered would be trained as weapons of war. The second was the complete opposite. The Academy City would be built into a university town. Different types of ability users would belong to different universities. The entire city would be made up of campuses, dormitories, commercial streets, and so on. It would completely serve the ability user students. The 2 above had their own characteristics, and could be said to be good. However, when Lianping saw the third, his eyes lit up. The chief designer of the third design was called Gao Yu. He was from the Gao family, one of the 9 royal families. This person had studied abroad in the Mist Federation. The third design he led had a strong sense of high-tech. It used many technologies that only the Western continent had, and the Eastern continent had not yet matured. According to this plan, the entire Academy City would be built into a self-sufficient city. Not only would it have campuses and dormitories, but it would also have a large research area and military buildings. At the same time, it would satisfy the requirements of superpower teaching, experiments, research, and military. More importantly, he proposed to imitate the Mist Federation Sky City and turn the entire Academy City into a city in the sky. Seeing this plan, Lianping was filled with interest. He raised his head and asked, "Can we build something like the Federation Sky City? How long would it take?" The Sky City on the other side of the Western continent took the Federation 10 years to build. It was a fortress in the sky unique to the Federation. Inside, it was filled with the most advanced high-tech weapons. The Federation relied on this fortress to intimidate the entire Western continent. They had always considered themselves as the strongest country in the world. Lu Sheng hesitated for a moment before saying, "The League of Stars said that they can provide the key technology. But even so, it will take more than 5 years to build." Lianping did not mind. "It's fine. We can build it slowly. We can first build a simplified Academy City according to the second plan and cultivate aptitude users from young. When the real Academy City is completed, we can move there." Lianping thought about it, but in the end, he didn't immediately throw out the secret martial arts book. He still planned to complete the Hell's Map himself. After modifying the 6 major systems, he would personally test and modify all the manuals before deciding on how to spread the ancient abilities. Next, after confirming the details of the Academy City, Lianping left and returned to the laboratory. He had to hurry up and finish modifying the respiratory system. At this moment, he had already forgotten about Tian Haowen. To Lianping, there was no need to worry about such a small character. Late at night, the next day, Jadeite City. A black shadow leaped between the buildings silently. Suddenly, it stopped on top of a building. Then it climbed up the wall with all 4 limbs and slowly climbed toward a window from the shadows. Tian Haowen, who was in a single room in a hotel, knew nothing about this. He was angrily logging onto Weibo, wanted to post about the shooting team being chased away. However, he realized that he could not log in. Every time, the password was displayed as wrong. He could not even retrieve the password. Just as he was angrily typing on the keyboard, a male voice came from behind him. "Tian Haowen." Tian Haowen was shocked. He quickly turned around and stood up. He saw a man standing in the shadows beside the window. He could not see the man's face clearly. He picked up the short stick on the table. It was obviously a self-defense weapon because he had been attacked in the past. Waving the funny short stick, he said in a panic, "Who are you? Are you the Xia Dragonfinch's people?" Peter Parker's palm suddenly shot out a bunch of white threads and directly snatched the short stick. Then, he said coldly, "If I were them, you wouldn't have the chance to talk to me with a clear mind. Do you know how dangerous you are now? They can come for you at any time." Tian Haowen regained some of his composure. After hearing Peter Parker's words, he said proudly, "Let them come for me. I'm already prepared. Even if I have to bleed, even if I have to sacrifice myself, I will absolutely not tolerate this country being ruled by a dictator. I will become a butcher's knife in his hand. I know what the price of freedom and democracy is, but I have never regretted it." A strange look flashed in Peter Parker's eyes. But just as he was about to say something, a loud sound came from the door of the room. In the next moment, several black shadows rushed in. Chapter 2:30. Seeing someone rush in from outside the door, Peter Parker's expression changed greatly. He shouted, "Run!" After saying this, he didn't wait for Tian Haowen's reaction. A thread of spider silk shot out from his palm and stuck to Tian Haowen's waist, pulling him over. The next second, Peter Parker carried Tian Haowen and jumped out of the window. Unfortunately, although his series of reactions were already extremely fast, the ability user who had barged in was still a bit faster than him. Just a second before he was about to jump out of the window, a black figure suddenly darted out from the shadows below the window. The figure's entire body was pitch black. His hands turned into shadow-like sharp blades, fiercely chopping towards Peter Parker, who had jumped into the air. Is this the ability of shadow transformation? Peter Parker's expression didn't change. His left hand reached towards the ceiling. Peter Parker, who was originally in midair, definitely couldn't suddenly change direction or speed up. However, a white thread suddenly shot out from his wrist and stuck tightly to the ceiling. Then, with a pull, his body already brushed past the shadow blade, crashing towards the window of the hotel. With a clang, Peter Parker and Tion Howland both crashed through the window glass and flew into the air. Amidst Tion Howland's crazy screams, Peter Parker's left arm stretched out. A white thread shot towards the roof of the opposite building. After the thread stuck to the edge of the roof, Peter Parker grabbed Tion Howland with one hand and the thread with the other. Borrowing the force of the swing, he flew several hundred meters away. Peter Parker was like Tarzan. Relying on the threads that continuously shot out from his wrist, he was able to continuously shuttle through the jungle of reinforced concrete and quickly advance. However, this time there was clearly more than one ability user who had come to capture Tion Howland. A dark-skinned man was standing by the window. When he saw that Peter Parker was about to disappear from their sight, a huge and strange gun appeared in his hand. With a soft, muffled sound, a bullet was fired from the window. It was aimed at Peter Parker's back, who was in midair. However, long before the bullet left the chamber, his super-strong intuition had already turned the countless warnings of danger into a feeling that pierced straight into his heart, crazily transmitting them to Peter Parker's brain. Peter Parker, who had relied on his strong intuition to avoid danger many times, did not hesitate this time. He twisted his body and dodged to the side. But just as the bullet was about to fly past his body, an inexplicable luster flashed on the surface of the bullet. The bullet had already drawn an arc and passed through Peter Parker's shoulder. Peter Parker let out a muffled groan, but he clenched his teeth and endured it. His body continued to exert strength, and his right hand was still firmly holding onto the silk thread. Blood splattered in the air, and he finally disappeared from the sight of his pursuers. The dark-skinned man who fired the bullet snorted coldly. The strange spear in his hand had already disappeared. This guy's reaction is really fast. When I changed the direction of the bullet, I was clearly aiming for his heart, but he actually dodged it in advance. Beside him, a man wrapped in black clothes slowly crawled out from the shadows. What should we do? If he escapes, Scorpion won't let us go. This is our first mission after completing the training. The dark-skinned man who fired the gun also had a gloomy expression. He slowly said, "It's okay, we still have a chance. They won't leave the city so soon. Contact our colleagues in the Secret Service and find them." Just as the two of them were thinking about what to do next, their expressions suddenly changed at the same time. A wave of psychic energy that was like the sun appeared in their senses. That majestic power was something that even ordinary people would feel uneasy about. In the eyes of the two ability users, a huge and thick golden pillar of light had already soared into the sky from a few kilometers away. In a domineering, tyrannical, and almost unstoppable manner, it directly broke through the layers of clouds in the sky, dissipating over 10 kilometers away. After breaking through a huge hole in the layers of clouds, it gradually disappeared into the air. The dark-skinned man looked at the pillar of light that gradually turned into countless light spots and gradually disappeared into the air. He said in astonishment, "Is that Lord Golden Light? Has he also come to Jadeite City?" On the other side, the man with the shadow ability reacted even more directly. He directly jumped out of the window and descended to the ground below the 18th floor. However, before he could fall for a few meters, his entire person had already turned into a shadow on the ground. Then, he quickly rushed toward the place where the golden pillar of light had come from. The dark-skinned man also reacted. However, he did not have such a convenient means of rushing. He quickly rushed out of the room and rushed toward the direction of the golden light using the normal method. 10 minutes later, on the rooftop of an office building, a young man with black hair and eyes stood still. It was Golden Light, who had already removed his transformation. He suddenly turned his head and looked toward a stretch of shadow. A man was slowly crawling out from the shadow. Seeing Golden Light's gaze, the man quickly revealed a blue and white symbol. Frowning, Golden Light said, "You guys are also from Disya Dragonfinch?" The man looked at him with admiration and said, "Lord Golden Light, we're interns who have just completed our training. We're here to capture Tian Haowen." A hint of understanding flashed past Golden Light's face. So it's that guy. No wonder he looks so familiar. During this period of time, Tian Haowen had frequently appeared on television. Even though Golden Light did not watch much television, he still knew about this guy. He was captured by that bug. I've been chasing after that bug for over half a month. However, that guy seems to have some kind of ability to foresee danger. I can only injure him, but not capture him. The man with the shadow ability asked in puzzlement. Bug. It's that guy who spouts spider silk, Golden Light said calmly. His name is Peter Parker. He's a criminal I've been chasing after. The organization he set up in the past had the goal of rebelling against the Disya Dragonfinch. Hearing this, the man with the shadow ability groaned in his heart. He had not expected that not only had they not managed to capture Tian Haowen, but he had also been taken away by a terrorist. Their mission had completely failed. He held on to his last glimmer of hope and asked Golden Light, "Lord, did your attack earlier hurt them?" Golden Light looked at the cars passing by the building expressionlessly and said, he sensed it in advance and avoided it. However, although I didn't hit him directly, Tian Wenhao is just an ordinary person. Just the shock waves from the psychokinesis cannon brushing past the air are enough to make him suffer. Thinking of this, Golden Light felt hatred in his heart. Although he was faster than the other party, he did not know how to fly. He could only use his psychokinesis to pick him up into the air, and his speed was slower than the other parties. Peter Parker relied on his super intuition, strong body coordination, flexibility, and agility, as well as the ability to shoot spider silk from his hands. Although he was not a match for him in a head-on confrontation, he was an expert when it came to escaping from the city. If only I had the ability to fly. In his groggy state, Tian Haowen felt a heart-wrenching pain coming from his back. He wanted to cry out, but he felt as if his hands and feet were being pressed down to the ground by countless evil spirits. He could not muster up any strength at all. He wanted to open his eyes, but he felt as if his eyelids were extremely heavy, making it hard for him to open them. In the darkness, he felt as if someone was swaying him incessantly, as if they were inserting something into his body. A wave of drowsiness came over him, and he finally fainted completely. When Tian Haowen woke up, his nose was filled with the smell of disinfectant. A man's voice rang out in his ears, "Don't move. Your injuries are very serious." As he said this, an intense pain came from his back, causing Tian Haowen to cry out in agony. "Be softer. Do you want to be discovered?" Another man's voice rang out, giving Tian Haowen a sense of familiarity. "It's that man who saved me from the hotel." Tian Haowen gradually recalled what had happened before he fainted. He only remembered that the man had grabbed him and darted through the tall buildings. In the end, he suddenly felt an intense pain and fainted. Feeling the unimaginable pain on his back, Tian Haowen asked uneasily, "Who on earth are you guys? What on earth happened to me? What the F***CK is going on here? Who on earth are those people who attacked me?" Peter Parker exchanged a glance with a thin and weak man wearing glasses beside him. In the end, he was the one who said, "Let's explain it one by one. I'm Peter Parker, an ability user who specializes in finding trouble with the Disya Dragonfinch. The one beside me is Fong Ming. He used to be a field doctor in the Kirin group and has an irreconcilable feud with Lian Ping. He's the one who treated you. This thin and weak man, wearing glasses, was the only remaining member of the Kieran group that had been wiped out by Li Onping in Jadeite City back then. Back then, he had stayed in Biowest City alone to sell off the resources that the Kieran group had left behind. Because some of the goods were very difficult to sell, he had stayed behind for a period of time and managed to escape with his life. Peter Parker paused for a moment to give Tian Howin some time to digest the information. Then he continued, "You're injured. The people who attacked us are all ability users from the Xia Dragonfinch. Especially that last guy. His name is Jing Guang. You should have seen him on the news during the tsunami. Although I try my best to avoid it, your physique is too weak and you still suffered some injuries." Seeming to hear a hint of pity in Peter Parker's words, Tian Howin asked anxiously, "What injuries did I suffer? Am I going to die?" Fong Ming pushed up his glasses and glanced at the panicking Tian Howin. He said helplessly, "You won't die, but the shock wave damaged your spinal nerves. Your lower half of your body is paralyzed." Only after hearing this news did Tian Howin realize that the feeling in his lower half of his body had disappeared. He stared blankly at the ceiling, a hint of despair flashing through his eyes. Seeing Tian Howin remain silent, Peter Parker was silent for a moment before he continued. "This is the price you have to pay for going against Li Onping. When facing him, you have to be prepared to be crushed and your family destroyed. It's not something that can be done with just a few words. We'll be resting here for a day before leaving. If you still plan on going against him, let Fong Ming know." Halfway through his words, Peter Parker's expression suddenly changed. He looked at the man on the hospital bed in shock. At the same time, far away in the south, some small fish were splashing against the current. Li Onping had already returned to the laboratory to begin his second modification. On the highly intelligent operating table, the chest was directly exposed to the air. The flesh in the lungs was like a special life form. At a very slow speed, it was twisting and changing shape bit by bit. It was as if millions upon millions of years of evolution had been condensed into a few short days. At the same time, under Li Onping's calm operation, tubes of special medicine, nutrient solution, and nanomaterials appeared in the hands of the mechanical arm and were injected into the lungs. There was no hint of panic or nervousness on the expressionless face of Li Onping. It was as if the body before him was not his, but someone else's. Step by step, he methodically modified the lungs, throat, trachea, and other parts of the respiratory system according to the knowledge recorded in the Hell's Map. Chapter 231. In the office, Lu Sheng was reviewing documents. Although he looked a little thin recently, as if he was worried about the Xia Dragonfinch, but his eyes were still full of vigor. As Li Onping's power grew stronger, he gradually handed over more power to his subordinates. Just like the Xia Dragonfinch, unless there were some special circumstances that required his instructions, he basically handed everything over to Lu Sheng. And during this time, Lu Sheng finally stepped on the peak of power in his life. An unprecedented sense of fulfillment and accomplishment spread in his body, and he basically gave up on training his ability and put his whole body and mind into the construction of the Xia Dragonfinch. He basically spent most of the day in this office. At this time, he was reading the report about Tian Howin in his hand. The executors of this character were codenamed Shadow and Gunner. Although they were two newcomers, with their ability, dealing with an ordinary person like Tian Howin should be easy. But they failed. Peter Parker, these two people actually came together. Thinking of this, Lu Sheng continued to read. After that, Golden Light led Shadow and Gunner to ambush Peter Parker again, but the other party paid the price of serious injury and continued to escape. Golden Light chased down alone, while Shadow and Gunner tried to find a way to find Tian Howin. But since he was taken away by Peter Parker, Tian Howin seemed to have completely disappeared. Not only did they not find him, but they also did not find any trace of him in all of their surveillance. All of his online accounts have not been logged in since the day he disappeared. All of his relatives, even his ex-wife and children, have not received any calls. Even his bank account, the money in it has not been touched. Although the body was not found, Scorpion, who was in charge of Tion Howen's matter, believed that the other party may have been killed by the aftermath of Golden Light's attack. He applied for the police in Jadeite City to conduct a basic investigation and make the final confirmation. Lu Sheng thought about it and rejected this request. Tion Howen was a little troublesome. However, in front of the serious Great Xia Dragonfinch, it was not even worth mentioning. Even if he appeared again, he would not have the chance to speak to the public. From the looks of it, even if he didn't die under the attack of the Golden Light, he probably wouldn't be in a good condition. He completely understood his situation. He chose to give up his past and hide. Lu Sheng was also too lazy to waste manpower and resources to look for him. Jadeite City was currently in a sensitive period, so there was no need to complicate matters. After making new arrangements for the Shadow and Gunner who had not completed their mission, Lu Sheng looked at the next document. But at that moment, the phone on his desk rang. When he heard the phone ring, he frowned deeply. There were two phones on his desk, one black and one red. Lu Sheng didn't want to receive a red phone call because it meant that there was an emergency. Lu Sheng picked up the phone. "Hello, I'm codenamed I-233. I'm currently in a sewer somewhere in the capital." The sound of heavy breathing came from the other side. Lu Sheng asked, "You should know what the priority of this call is. What exactly happened to you?" Monster." The voice on the other side revealed a trace of fear. "The immortality medicine exists, but..." "Monster." Static suddenly came from the phone, followed by a series of gunshots and terrified screams. Lu Sheng shouted, "Hello? Hello? Where are you? What monster?" But the other side seemed to have no time to care about the phone. After another miserable scream, everything returned to normal. Lu Sheng held his breath as he listened to the sound coming from the phone. It seemed to be the panting of some kind of animal, and there was also the sound of chewing and tearing. Then there was a crackling sound, and there was no more sound. The phone seemed to have been destroyed by someone. Lu Sheng could only hear the busy tone. All of this was so unusual that Lu Sheng was bewildered. He had only received the news about what happened in the capital 2 days ago. As the capital of Danyang, some myths about the so-called immortality medicine began to spread in the capital for some reason. The Xia Dragonfinch had undercover investigators in the capital in the early years. Although they had almost no ability, they had the authority to directly contact the Xia Dragonfinch's superiors. This time, they were only investigating the strange rumors circulating in the capital to ensure that Li Onping's trip to Danyang would not be affected. Even Lu Sheng did not pay attention to this small matter. In the end, he seemed to have found something unusual. In particular, the statement that the immortality medicine really existed and the so-called monster attracted Lu Sheng's attention. He thought about it and finally dialed a number. "Hello?" A woman's voice came from the other side. She said who she was looking for, and there was the sound of banging and another woman screaming and gasping. Lu Sheng's face darkened. He said angrily, "Tell Yan Bei that I'm Lu Sheng. Tell him to come see me immediately." 10 days later, in a laboratory, Li Onping's modification was nearing completion. The wound on his chest was slowly stitched up, and the mechanical arm was put back on the operating table. He slowly sat up and could clearly feel every breath that was inhaled into his throat. He could feel that these air entered his lungs and turned into all kinds of nutrients that were directly transported to his blood vessels. Then, they were transported to all parts of his body by his blood. Li Onping's cells seemed to be cheering for these nutrients that were transported to his body. Compared to his current breathing, every breath he took before was like the exhaust of a car. He could feel that with every passing moment, his body's constitution was improving at an extremely small rate with the help of these nutrients. He felt that even if he did nothing, his body would be able to break through the limit of 29 in a few years' time and reach the 5th energy rank. However, Li Onping knew that this was not the limit of his respiratory system. He had only completed the preliminary modification of his respiratory system. Because he did not have the cooperation of the other 5 major systems, Even if Li Onping could absorb all kinds of gases, his body could not absorb them. Only after the modification of all 6 major systems was completed could he truly absorb all kinds of gases and turn them into his own nutrients. But even so, it was already very impressive. Not only did the efficiency of absorbing oxygen greatly increase, Li Onping felt that his sense of smell had also become more sensitive. He could clearly distinguish the smell of every object in the laboratory. If the laboratory was not sealed up, he would be able to clearly identify the location of everyone within a few thousand meters around him with just a sniff. Not only that, but his lungs, throat, and mouth's ability to breathe had also greatly improved. In short, the modification of his respiratory system had been completed. The next step was to wait for all 6 major systems to be completed. His entire body would completely break the human limit and begin to evolve and become stronger without limit. Therefore, Li Onping could choose the next system to modify. However, time passed quickly. After the modification of his respiratory system was completed today, there was less than a week left before he had to go to Danyang City. Although Li Onping wanted to hide in the laboratory alone and complete all the modifications in one go, there were some things that he had to do. Thinking of this, he opened the door and walked out of the laboratory. Chapter 232. The moment he noticed that Li Onping had walked out of the laboratory once again, Sherwin ran over anxiously. Thankfully, this time around, Li Onping did not leave quickly. Therefore, when Sherwin ran over, he happened to see Li Onping. Without waiting for Li Onping to say anything, he asked, "What on earth is that piece of meat you gave me?" "Why? Did something happen?" Sherwin said, "He attacked someone." Saying that, he took out a tablet and handed it to Li Onping. On it was a surveillance video. A researcher was using an instrument to detect that piece of flesh stone. Everything had been normal. The stone had been placed in a glass cover, and the entire process had been controlled by a mechanical arm. However, all of a sudden, for some reason, the mechanical arm had malfunctioned. That researcher had been operating it for a very long time, but there had been no reaction. Therefore, out of greed for convenience, that researcher had violated the laboratory's rules and opened the glass cover himself, wanting to control the mechanical arm personally. Unexpectedly, just as he had reached out to grab the mechanical arm, that piece of flesh stone trembled fiercely, for tentacles stretched out from it and tied up that researcher, dragging him over bit by bit. Then, that piece of flesh stone was like some kind of special living creature, sucking the researcher in bit by bit. It looked like it was eating him. When the security guard arrived, that researcher was only left with one leg. "What on earth is this thing?" Sherwin said, feeling a little creeped out. Later on, we increased its protective equipment. However, no matter how we probed, we were unable to detect any signs of life from it. However, it just had to eat one of my researchers. Li Onping looked at that piece of rock in the video, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Interesting. Have you done animal experiments before?" "Of course. However, no matter what animals we used, it never showed any reaction. Even when we sent clones, it never ate humans again." Sherwin felt a little helpless. Li Onping gave it some thought and said, "Find some animals and eat it." "What?" Sherwin asked, puzzled. Li Onping smiled and said, "I said eat it. I want to know what kind of reaction there will be after eating it." "You're not thinking of eating it, are you?" Sherwin advised. "That's not a good idea. We still don't know what it is, and we don't even know if a human stomach acid can digest it. Furthermore, once it reanimates in your stomach, even you will be in danger. That's why I want you to study it." Although Li Onping's body was telling him that he should eat the flesh stone, his body was just acting on instinct. Just like cats and dogs, under the control of their instincts, they would always eat too much or things that they shouldn't eat. Therefore, although his body instinctively wanted to absorb this flesh stone, Li Onping wouldn't eat it casually. At the very least, he had to wait until Sherwin had thoroughly studied him. He continued, "Don't worry, I won't eat it before I figure out what it is." "All right." Sherwin nodded his head. "However, I can't guarantee how much time I'll need to figure this out. Right now, we have no clue at all. Don't worry, we have plenty of time. After saying that, Li Onping left alone. Sherwin looked at his back and suddenly said, "By the way, Lu Sheng asked you to look for him when you're free. He said that he has something to show you." Li Onping nodded and left the research institute. The moment he left the research institute, he saw Xiao Xuesu waiting at the door. From the looks of it, they had received a notice from the research institute in advance and informed them the moment Li Onping came out. However, Xiao Xuesu seemed to be wearing something special today. Or rather, it was especially revealing. The unfathomable cleavage on her chest and the high slit next to her legs made one's heart beat faster. Li Onping looked at her face. Her eyes seemed to be filled with some kind of anticipation. After thinking for a moment, Li Onping understood. From the looks of it, Xiao Xuesu had also received the news that Li Onping was considering marriage. Clearly, she and the family behind her wanted to occupy a place in Li Onping's marriage. As expected, the moment Xiao Xuesu came up, she hugged Li Onping's arm. She clamped Li Onping's strong arm tightly with the deep cleavage on her chest. Waves of softness came from Li Onping's arm. "Sir, you've been in the Research Institute for so long. Do you want to take a bath and have a meal first? I've made a reservation at a hotel. The environment there is quite good." Unfortunately, in the face of her invitation, Li Onping did not give the reaction she expected. He said indifferently, "No need." The next moment, Li Onping's ears twitched, and he gently pushed away Xiao Xuesu, who was hugging him. He sneered and said, "I didn't expect that in just a few days there would be someone who doesn't know the difference between life and death." A few jeeps were seen rampaging through the streets of the city center. The people in the jeeps were shouting slogans in Bayua's language and constantly firing machine guns. Dozens of pedestrians on the street were shot to death. Even more pedestrians screamed and ran away. "Long live Baiwa! Go to hell, you pigs to Xia!" However, after they rushed through 2 blocks, a large number of police cars appeared in their field of vision. The sound of helicopters could be heard in the air. Yang Guang was wearing a combat uniform. He stood in front of a few police cars and armored vehicles. He looked at the jeeps in front of him angrily. He raised his loudspeaker and shouted, "You have been surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately." After saying this, he made a gesture to the adjutant beside him to kill them all. Before they arrived, they had already made a decision. Whether these terrorists surrendered or not, they had to die. Once they put down their guns, what awaited them was an endless rain of bullets. However, it was clear that these lunatics who came to Tianjin to launch a terrorist attack were completely unafraid of death. When they saw Yang Guang and the others, not only did they not surrender, but they also shouted slogans and rushed over in their jeeps. Standing in the jeep, they took off their clothes. Dozens of grenades and explosives were tied to their naked upper bodies. When he saw these explosives, Yang Guang's eyes narrowed and his pupils contracted. These explosives were no threat to him. However, once they exploded, the policemen and some of the Dragon Sparrow Guard around him would die without a doubt. These terrorists were far crazier than they had imagined. Yang Guang immediately grabbed the machine gun of an armed policeman around him. After tens of thousands of rehearsals, his movements were as smooth as flowing water. In less than a second, he had completed all his preparations and aimed the scope at the jeep's tires. With a bang, the bullet shot out and the tires suddenly exploded. In the blink of an eye, the jeep overturned on the side of the street. However, only one jeep was overturned. There were 2 other similar jeeps. Yang Guang quickly aimed and fired again. Once again, he overturned another jeep. However, the remaining jeep was already very close to him. Yang Guang helplessly put down the machine gun. His entire body had already turned into a diamond, and he rushed over. He wanted to use his body to block the explosion. Although he would definitely be unharmed, he was too close to the explosion. Moreover, there might not only be grenades and explosives in the jeep. The ordinary people behind him would still be in danger. If any of the police or even the aptitude users of the Xia Dragonfinch were sacrificed in this kind of terrorist attack, it would be a huge blow to the prestige of the government. Just as Yang Guang transformed into a diamond giant and rushed toward the jeep with a roar, The armed policemen and aptitude users behind him hurriedly attacked the jeep. Suddenly, the entire scene seemed to come to a standstill. A black shadow flashed. Lianping had already appeared between Yang Guang and the jeep. Yang Guang's enraged expression, as well as the twisted, crazed, and vengeful faces of the Baiwei people on the jeep, were all clearly displayed in front of Lianping. In this seemingly still space, Lianping slowly walked toward the jeep in front of him. He reached out a hand and gently lifted the bumper in front of the jeep. In the next moment, time seemed to flow again. In everyone's eyes, they could only see Lianping suddenly appear in front of the jeep. In the next moment, the jeep soared into the sky and flew into the air. A loud whistling sound was heard. The jeep flew hundreds of meters into the sky at a speed that ordinary people's eyes could not follow. At this moment, another loud sound was heard. Lianping, who was standing on the ground, opened his mouth. The viscous air was like a white shockwave that shot out from his mouth. It turned into a huge air column and caught up with the jeep in the air. Amidst an earth-shattering explosion, when a white shockwave disappeared, both the jeep and the people in the jeep had disappeared. When everyone lowered their heads to look for Lianping again, they found that he had already left his original position and appeared next to an overturned jeep. Looking at the Baiwei, people who were slowly climbing out of the jeep with their faces covered in blood, Lianping snorted coldly. He directly grabbed the person and threw him toward Yang Guang. He knew that Yang Guang would definitely catch this person alive. Without turning back to look, he directly pressed his hand against the jeep. The virtual force field was activated. Under the force of several tens of thousands of tons, there were no obstructions or screams. In the blink of an eye, the entire jeep, along with the Baiwa people inside, was compressed into a palm-sized metal ball by the virtual force field. There seemed to be faint sparks coming out of the metal ball. Those were the grenades and the explosives in the jeep that had started to explode. However, they were unable to break through the pressure of the virtual force field. However, without Lianping's physical contact, the virtual force field would immediately disappear. Looking at the metal ball that was emitting sparks, Lianping directly reached out his right hand and grabbed it, squeezing the compressed metal ball in his palm. A soft boom rang out from his palm. However, no matter how earth-shattering the explosion was, Lianping's fingers did not even tremble when he held the metal ball in his hand. Under the dual pressure from both inside and outside, when Lianping released his palm, only a pile of ashes was left floating in the air. A gulping sound rang out from everyone's throats. Everyone who saw this scene could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. While Yang Guang caught the person alive, he looked at the location of the other jeep. However, other than a pile of ashes, there was nothing left. Yang Guang was shocked. Although he knew that Lianping was his superior, he could not help but reveal a look of shock in his eyes. This was because everything before his eyes showed that long before Lianping crushed the jeep, he had already destroyed the other jeep at an extremely fast speed. However, no one present saw how he did it or when he did it. Chapter 233. Lianping pushed open the door and walked into Lu Sheng's office. He was staring at the screen, which was showing Lianping stopping the explosion today. Lu Sheng turned around, looked at Lianping and said, "Sir." Lianping casually found a seat and sat down, then asked Lu Sheng, "Did you find out who it was?" "It's Blue. They just released a statement on the internet, admitting responsibility for this terrorist incident." Lu Sheng saw that Lianping was a little confused, so he explained, "Blue was originally a mercenary group of Baiwei, since Fang Yuhuang took over Baiwei. This mercenary group was the first to jump out to oppose and wantonly spread a lot of words that were not favorable to us. But with the slogan of patriotism and independence, they won over many young people of Baiwei." Lianping frowned. "Fang Yuhuang didn't care about Blue?" Lu Sheng said, "All the opposing forces in Baiwei have been eliminated by Fang Yuhuang, but Blue has already withdrawn to foreign countries. We suspect that there are other countries secretly supporting them." Lianping sneered, The other countries in the dark were none other than the other countries in the 18 southern countries that still didn't want to join the Pan-Continent Alliance, or a few big countries in the western continent. Lianping looked at Lu Sheng and said, Scorpion is in Jadeite City, right? Let him take people there and send a few level 4 ability users to support. Don't leave any of Blue's people. He paused and said, Also, let the left side hurry up. I've already taken over Baiwe. Before the end of the year, I don't want to hear any opposition from other countries in the south. Let him go to Feng Yuhuang. If he has any problems, Baiwe will fully support him. Lu Sheng nodded, I understand. Lu Sheng seemed to be worried that Li Anping would dive into the laboratory again. So he said, Sir, there is one more thing. Seeing Lu Sheng's serious look, Li Anping asked curiously, What's the matter? Please come with me. After that, Lu Sheng stood up and walked out of the office. The two of them walked along the corridors of the Xiaolong K base and headed deep underground. Wherever he went, all kinds of staff and ability users respectfully greeted Lianping. Recently, the Xia Dragonfinch's strength had increased tremendously, and Lianping was buried in his laboratory every day. This was the first time many of the newcomers had seen him. However, as they walked further and further into the base, after passing through several electronic doors, they gradually couldn't see any staff members around them. At this moment, Lu Sheng said, My lord, I'm sorry, but the situation is a bit strange and it happened in Donyang. That's why I'm reporting this to you. It's all right, go ahead. The two of them walked and talked. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived in front of a ward. Yin Bei was lying on the bed with a pale and tired face. He looked like he was unconscious. Some time ago, some myths began to spread in the capital of Donyang. Rumors like the immortality potion were spread. In this era, no one should believe such rumors, but for some reason, there seemed to be a force spreading these rumors behind the scenes. Not only did the story not gradually disappear, but it also became more and more popular. More than 10 days ago, the investigator we left in the capital called me directly and said that the immortality potion did exist, but he was then killed. In order to figure out what was going on, I sent Yin Bei over. Lu Sheng's tone was slightly heavy. He sighed and said, The day after Yin Bei arrived in the capital, I lost contact with him. It wasn't until yesterday that he suddenly contacted us. He said that he was being chased and fled back to the Xiaolong. However, when the people I sent arrived at the place where we agreed to meet, they only found Yin Bei lying in a pool of blood. According to the doctor, he was bitten by wild beasts all over his body, and he had lost a lot of blood. It was a miracle that he could hold on until there. Although Kevin used his ability to save him, I'm afraid he will be in a coma for a long time because of the severe blood loss. Kevin was one of the ability users that Li Anping rescued from the underworld. He was Emma's subordinate and the person who wanted to use his ability to heal Li Anping. Speaking of this, Lu Sheng turned around and said respectfully, My lord, please come with me. Then, he led Li Anping through the electronic door on the side, through a long corridor, and into a secret room. Before Yin Bei woke up, we didn't know what happened to him. However, when the doctor gave him a physical examination, they found this thing in his stomach. As he spoke, Lu Sheng fiddled with the control panel from a distance. A crack appeared on the ground, and a cylindrical object slowly rose up. The cylindrical object seemed to be shedding its skin as it unfolded layer by layer. At the same time, a cold air gushed out from it. When the cylinder was completely unfolded, a white test tube appeared in front of Li Anping. There was a white liquid inside. Lu Sheng said, Although we don't know who attacked Yin Bei is a level 4 ability user. Coupled with his collapsing ability, he is a threat even to level 5 ability users. To be able to injure him like this, I'm afraid that the Donyang government or even the League of Stars is behind this. The senior management of Xia Dragonfinch had already concluded that the League of Stars had taken the initiative to retreat from Donyang City. They believed that there must be some kind of conspiracy behind this. This time, Yin Bei was attacked, so they couldn't help but suspect this. However, Li Anping didn't comment on this. Compared to the Donyang government or the League of Stars, another shadow popped up in his mind. Immortality potion. Myths and legends reminded him of an organization that had invited him to Dongyang City, the Divine Realm. Did you do this? Thinking of this, Li Onping grabbed the test tube. A trace of coldness was transmitted from the test tube to his palm. Li Onping chuckled and said, "Have you tested this potion? Can it really give immortality?" Lu Shang said, "I asked someone to test it a little. This potion can accelerate the recovery of injuries and cure many kinds of diseases, but I'm not sure if it has the effect of immortality yet." Then, Lu Sheng operated the control panel again, and a document was projected in front of Lianping. It was a detailed report about the potion in front of him. Lianping skimmed through it and jumped directly to the final conclusion. Because the amount of the potion was too small, only half of the potion was used for live experiments. However, according to the 3 experiments so far, this potion could indeed increase the vitality of the user. However, if one wanted to extend their life, they had to take it for a long time. Otherwise, the excess vitality would be quickly consumed by the user. In other words, this so-called immortality potion could indeed increase the lifespan of humans. Seeing this, Li Onping narrowed his eyes. If the inference in the report was correct, the value of this potion was indeed immeasurable. No wonder Lu Sheng was so serious about it. Thinking about how tempting immortality was, once this report was made public, the entire human world would be in an uproar. Thinking of this, Li Onping asked, "What about the people in charge of the research of the potion? I've temporarily put them under house arrest and forbade them from disclosing information." Speaking of this, a hint of worry appeared on Lu Sheng's face. "However, I'm afraid that our country isn't the only country involved in this investigation." Li Onping frowned and said, "Ask Emma to come over." What Li Onping did not know was that when the Xia Dragonfinch discovered this so-called immortality potion, all the major ability user organizations in the world had found out about it through various sources. They had all turned their attention to the capital of the Eastern Sun Empire. A huge net that covered the sky and covered the earth was slowly unfolding. A few days later, in a mountain range in the southern part of the eastern continent, the originally peaceful village was covered by soaring flames and shrill screams. Countless corpses of soldiers were piled up and set on fire. A group of children, women, and children were gathered around the bonfire formed by the corpses. They looked at the dragon sparrow guards who had set the flames on fire with eyes filled with hatred. Scorpion laughed and walked toward one of the boys. Seeing that the boy was staring at him fiercely, Scorpion grabbed the boy and choked him. A few girls at the side immediately screamed and rushed over. However, they were chased away by the nearby dragon sparrow guards who were holding spears. Scorpion grabbed the boy by the neck with one hand and lifted him up. The boy's legs kicked wildly, his eyes rolled back, and his face gradually turned green. A stone hit Scorpion's arm, and he couldn't help but let go of the boy. The boy also took the opportunity to gasp for air. Sun Hao said coldly, "Do you want to kill him?" Scorpion looked at Sun Hao unhappily. These are the remnants of the Blue Clan. The Blue Clan's terrorist activities in Tianjing have killed 43 people. Do you think that if we kill their fathers and brothers today, they won't take revenge on us when they grow up? Even if they don't take revenge on us, they'll take revenge on the people of the Xia and repeat their terrorist activities. Sun Hao said helplessly, "They're still children." The Lord said that all the people from the Blue Clan must die. After saying this, an invisible tail swept across the boy's head from behind Scorpion, smashing his head into pieces. Sun Hao looked at Scorpion with an ashen expression and then turned to leave. Scorpion shrugged. He knew that something like this would happen long before he came here. However, after Sun Hao found out about the Blue Clan's terrorist activities and insisted on participating in this operation, Scorpion agreed to let him come. Now, it seemed that the other party was still not mature enough. Chapter 234. In the underground training room, Li Onping was thinking about the content of thoughtless assassination while punching and kicking from time to time. Every time his limbs vibrated, a series of afterimages would appear, making it hard for people to see him clearly. Because there were still a few days before he went to Danyang, Li Onping did not plan to continue the next system transformation. Instead, he studied the secret martial arts that he had obtained. Li Onping deliberately looked at the 3 secret martial arts that might meet his requirements. Among them, the Crimson Phoenix Flame Slayer required a long time to accumulate heat in the body, while the Immortal Thunder Aperture involved the transformation of the internal blood vessels and muscles of the body. Li Onping did not plan to practice them for the time being. On the other hand, the first part of Silent Murder was all about the training of one's physical fitness. The real content could only be used after one had enough physical fitness. The so-called thoughtless assassination was a series of powerful assassination methods. At the beginning, it was about how to meditate, restrain one's mind and energy, and deeply hide one's killing intent and hostility. After that, it was about various kinds of body movements, light and darkness changes, as well as illusions made use of the environment to hide one's whereabouts as much as possible. After practicing thoughtless assassination, not only could one completely hide one's killing intent, but even after attacking the opponent, one could not feel one's hostility at all, and even ignore one's existence. Although this secret martial art was not in line with Li Onping's usual open and above-board style, it still aroused his interest. Li Onping on the field was motionless, and his breathing gradually weakened. It seemed that his whole person began to fade. At this moment, the door of the training room opened, and a staff member came in with a long sword made of adamantium. But when he looked around the training room, he shook his head. Where's Sir? Li Onping was standing in the middle of the hall, motionless, but the staff member did not seem to see him. Shaking his head in confusion, the staff member turned around and went out. At this moment, Li Onping said, "Give me the sword." The staff member hurriedly turned around and ran to Li Onping. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see you just now. This is your sword and the sword belt that you requested." "It's fine." Li Onping had just used thoughtless murder to avoid being detected by ordinary people, so he naturally wouldn't blame him. After receiving the alloy sword and sword belt, Li Onping casually tied the sword belt around his waist before attaching the alloy sword to the sword belt around his waist. This time, Li Onping went to Danyang City to deal with the Divine Realm and the Danyang government at the same time. Although he was very confident that he would not be injured. However, he would not be blindly arrogant. After all, if his chest was injured and he used ultra-rapid regeneration, the modification of his respiratory system would be in vain. Therefore, he decided to bring the alloy sword with him this time. With the sturdiness of adamantium and Li Onping's strength and speed, they were practically invincible. After picking up the sword, Li Onping's breathing became faintly discernible again. The staff member's eyes suddenly widened as he shouted in disbelief, "Sir? My lord, where are you?" He frowned and left while rubbing his head. "That's strange. Why did my lord disappear again? Is it a new ability?" Li Onping, who was beside him, didn't care at all. Relying on his strong physique and his amazing control over his body after mastering Blood Body, Li Onping was able to master thoughtless, insidious murder in a short period of time. However, the time was too short. If he wanted to maintain this state, he had to keep his entire body still. Moreover, with his current level of thoughtless murder, he could only deceive ordinary people at most. Ordinary people would completely ignore his existence. The mind of an ability user was far stronger and more sensitive than ordinary people. Now, Li Onping's thoughtless murder didn't have much effect. However, there were still a few days before he left the Xia. Li Onping believed that if he practiced seriously, he should be able to improve. In the field, Li Onping's breathing was still faintly discernible, but his body started to move. Every movement seemed to bring about an afterimage. His whole body looked blurry, like a ghost. With his strong mind and body control, Li Onping's improvement speed became faster and faster. He also became more and more proficient in hiding his aura and hostility in thoughtless murder and using the changes of light and darkness to hide his body. However, he was only practicing for fun. What he really wanted to do was to improve this secret martial art and reduce its difficulty, so that more people could learn from him. However, from the current situation, the most important thing about thoughtless murder was the physical fitness, highly condensed mind, and focus. Ordinary people would probably have to practice martial arts or meditate for more than 10 years to achieve these. The gains didn't make up for the losses. Perhaps I should improve the physical fitness of all civilians first. I can consider it from the perspective of biotechnology and secret martial arts. Let everyone's physical fitness be improved and build an excellent foundation. 4 hours passed in the blink of an eye as he thought and practiced. Liamping gradually had some ideas in his mind. However, he still needed time to perfect it. Just as Liamping was practicing thoughtless murder, Emma, Hansen, and Pink had taken a plane to Jingdu. The two of them were Emma's subordinates in the underworld. After joining the Xia Dragonfinch together, they were both assigned to Emma's subordinates. At present, Lu Sheng was in charge of the overall management of the Xia Dragonfinch. Yang Wang was in charge of the safety of Tianjing City and the training of the new members. Lu Feng was in charge of intelligence and external publicity. There was also Scorpion, Zhuomai, and Yin Bei in charge of external combat. Although Emma was powerful, she didn't care about power. She would ask for her help when there was an emergency. However, no one looked down on her because of this. After all, she was a level 5 ability user. If Li Anping wasn't included, she was the strongest person in the Xia Dragonfinch now. However, when the three of them got off the plane, countless news about them had been spread. Silently, a storm of killing that was about to set off in Danyang City had quietly begun. In the city center of Jingdu, a bustling skyscraper stood there. Teuchi Oda was just an ordinary office worker. However, in the past half a month, the nightmarish experience had completely overturned his worldview. In a coffee shop, Teuchi Oda's eyebrows were tightly knitted as he absent-mindedly stirred the spoon in his coffee cup. At this moment, two men around the same age as him walked toward where he was sitting. Oda, you brat. Why did you think of looking for us? After graduating from university, we haven't seen each other for over a year. Among the newcomers, the tall and handsome one was called Ahara Sanghai. The other one had a thin and weak body with a feminine appearance. He wore a pair of black-framed glasses and was called Chiba Thi. Both of them appeared tall and handsome, young and promising. After graduating for a year, they were already working in a large company in the city center. Compared to the ordinary-looking Teuchi Oda, they were like people from two different worlds. However, the three of them were university roommates. Although they had not seen each other for a year, they had always kept in touch with each other through the internet. They were also Takeuchi Oda's most trusted friends. The three of them chatted for a while. Takeuchi Oda listened as the two of them talked about their experiences after graduation. A look of envy appeared on his face. The tall and strong Ahara Sanghai said, Oda, didn't you study computer science in university? Do you want to come to our company? Our IT department is lacking people. I can introduce you to them. Oda quickly declined. No need to trouble yourself. You know me, I've already finished university. My computer skills are only at the level of playing games. The thin and weak Chiba Thi pushed up his glasses and looked at the gloomy Teuchi Oda. He asked with concern, Oda, is there something wrong? If you need help, just tell us. We will do our best to help you. Ahara Sanghai also expressed his affirmation. However, in the face of the persuasion of his two good friends, only shook his head. Actually, I came here this time to see you one last time. I will be returning to my hometown tonight. What? Why? Back then, didn't we agree to start a career in Kyoto? However, no matter how the two of them asked, Oda only shook his head. Seeing the angry looks on the two of them, Oda thought for a moment. In the end, he could not help but ask, You too, do you believe in the supernatural? Ahara Sanghai and Chiba Thi looked at each other strangely. You mean? Teuchi Oda continued asking, that is, superpowers. For example, regarding humans possessing superpowers. What do you think? Chiba Thi revealed a puzzled expression. However, he still answered seriously. Superpowers have always been regarded as a fantasy. However, there have been quite a number of such rumors recently. Ahara Songhai also nodded his head. Aoda, are you referring to the recent rumors about Xia? It seems that a person by the name of Li Onping has the superpower to cause tsunamis. Chiba Thi also said, recently, the news regarding this has been very popular. I have also seen the video. However, it is still hard to believe. Aoda looked at the two of them, discussing, and smiled awkwardly. In the end, he decided to keep the secret in his heart and did not say anything. Chapter 235. Late at night, on a small road in the outskirts of Kyoto, Teuchi Ida was walking alone towards his home. Tonight was his last day in Kyoto. He had already bought a ticket to leave at 10 p.m. Thinking back to his ambitions when he first came to Kyoto when he was young, the obstacles he encountered in the real world, and the series of bizarre encounters he had recently encountered, his mental state was in a terrible state. He walked toward his rented house in such a dispirited manner. However, when Teuchi Ioda turned a corner, he suddenly saw the back of a woman in white clothes under the dim street lamps. Originally, there was nothing strange about it. However, a few seconds after Teuchi Ioda saw the woman in white clothes suddenly disappeared. Like an ordinary person, the woman took a step to the side. However, with this step, it was as though she had entered another world. She disappeared from Teuchi Ioda's sight without a trace. Cold sweat instantly covered Teuchi Ioda's back. He suddenly rushed over and arrived at the place where the woman in white clothes had fought earlier. Damn it, she appeared again. As he thought of that, Teuchi Ioda looked left and right, seemingly trying to find traces of the woman in white. Suddenly, a beautiful white figure appeared at the corner of his eyes. The other party had already disappeared around the corner of an alley. Over there, please don't let anything happen to her. Takeuchi Ioda quickly ran toward the corner of the alley. However, when he arrived there, his eyes widened and his face was filled with shock. The alley before him was a dead end. There was no one inside. What is going on? I clearly saw her enter this place. As Takeuchi Ioda was looking left and right, trying to find traces of the woman, a hand patted him on the shoulder. A woman's voice rang out from behind him. What are you doing? The voice gave Teuchi Ioda a fright. He abruptly turned around and saw a white-clothed young girl standing behind him. The young woman had a head of long brown hair tied into a ponytail. Her unique gray pupils and high-nose bridge formed a mysterious and charming face. Is she a foreigner? The rare beauty caused Takeuchi Ioda to feel awkward. He slowly said, Are you all right? Are you hurt? Teuchi Ioda, who was too shy, did not notice that when he turned around, the ponytailed young woman revealed a look of shock. Her eyes were staring at his chest. The young woman took the initiative to introduce herself. Hello, my name is Emma. What's your name? My name is Tochi Seda. Takeuchi Ida smiled awkwardly. It's not safe here recently. It's already so late for a girl like you. You should hurry home. Is that so? Emma was non-committal, but her heart was filled with doubts. According to the calculations of the technical department, the place in front of them was the last location where Xia Dragonfinch's investigator in Jingdu had lost contact. However, up until now, she, Hansen, and Pink Baby had not found any problems. But just now, the man in front of her had given her an unexpected clue. On the chest of the man's jacket, there was a line of words formed by psychic energy. It was a message that only metahumans could see. Is this written by Yin Bei? It's all the Xia Dragonfinch's code. It'll take some effort to decipher it. Emma stared intently at the man's chest, memorizing all the code written on his chest with her psychic energy. However, Emma stared at it for too long. Even Takeuchi Seda noticed that something was amiss. He lowered his head to look at his jacket and patted it with his hand. He said in embarrassment, I've been wearing this jacket for almost a week. It's a little dirty. I'm sorry. However, Right after Kiseda said those words, Emma grabbed his hand and said coldly, "Don't move." Next, she used her hand to cover his chest. Naturally, Kiseda did not know that she was wiping away the words on his chest. From what he could see, the foreign beauty before him had suddenly begun to caress his chest. No, it can't be. Could it be that the heavens can't stand seeing how unlucky I am? What should I do if she wants to leave with me later? Damn it, I don't have the money to get a room anymore. If I bring her back to my rented apartment, will she despise me? As Takuchi Seida's face was flushed and his mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts, Emma's hand had already left his chest. She then pulled out a mobile phone and asked, "What's your phone number?" Takuchi Seida nervously gave out a series of numbers. After Emma pressed a few buttons, Takeuchi Seida's phone rang out from his trouser pocket. Emma said calmly, "This is my phone number. If you encounter any special matters, just give me a call." Takeuchi Seida pulled out his mobile phone and operated it as he said, "Oh, all right. What special matters do you mean?" Halfway through his words, when Takuchi Seida raised his head, the young girl with the ponytail had disappeared. A gust of cold wind blew, causing Takuchi Seida to shiver uncontrollably. Could it be that I've encountered a ghost? However, when he looked at the phone number displayed on his mobile phone and saw how real it was, he began to feel uncertain. As he was worrying about his personal gains and losses, Takeuchi Seida returned to his little nest in the capital. It was a single room with an area of less than 10 square meters. The housing prices in the capital were simply too expensive. Given Takeuchi Seida's income, he could only afford to rent this small area of 10 square meters. Although the space was small, it was fully equipped. The small single room not only had an air conditioner, refrigerator, natural gas stove, there was even a toilet and shower cubicle using plastic sheets. However, tonight, all the items in the room had been kept away, leaving only a few boxes by the door. Looking at the room that he had spent a year in and thinking about the hard work and effort he had put in this year, Takeuchi Seida sighed softly. In the end, do I still have to leave? Shaking his head, Takeuchi Seida seemingly tossed the hesitation in his heart out. He picked up his luggage and walked out the door. After taking one last look at the room that he had stayed in for a year, he closed the door and left without looking back. It was already 11 o'clock at night. Takeuchi Seida was the only one walking on a small road in the suburbs. He could not help but think about the young girl in white who had appeared earlier. He hesitated and thought, should I make a call now? However, she told me to call her only when there is something special. If I call her now, will she get angry? As Takeuchi Seida was letting his mind wander, he failed to notice that the mobile phone in his trouser pocket was vibrating nonstop. Unknowingly, he seemed to be walking further and further away. For some unknown reason, the street lamps on the originally bright street were broken. Under the dim light, everything appeared unreal. A sound suddenly rang out. Before Takeuchi Seida could react, a loud shout rang out from behind him. "Be careful!" An arm grabbed onto his arm, and an unimaginably large force dragged him forward. Next, a black light flashed out. By the time Takeuchi Seida reacted, he found himself several hundred meters away. He looked beside him with a shocked expression. The foreign girl, Emma, was currently grabbing onto his arm and looking warily at the spot where they had just been. Takeuchi Seida followed her gaze and saw a man standing at the spot where he had been standing. The man wore tight black clothes and a mask on his head. He held a metal dagger in his hand and looked like a legendary ninja. Unlike Takeuchi Hyoda, who was confused, Emma's vigilance towards this man was raised to the maximum. Earlier, she had remembered the code that Yinbei had left behind and rushed back to meet up with Hansen and Pink before decoding it. She had originally thought that it was something that Yinbei had casually left behind on the bodies of the nearby residents as a clue. However, after decoding it, she only managed to obtain 4 words, elixir of immortality. The line of mental energy code on Takeuchi Seida's body was those 4 words that she had no clue about. Amidst her confusion, Emma thought about it and decided to look for Takeuchi Seida. However, no one answered her call. Emma could only release her mental energy to scan the area. Thankfully, Takeuchi Seda had not gone too far. However, when she discovered him, she saw a man dressed like an assassin attacking Takeuchi Seda from behind. In that moment of crisis, she used spatial teleportation to save Takeuchi Seda. The masked man sneered. However, he did not say anything. In the next second, he disappeared from Emma's line of sight. He turned invisible. As Emma was thinking that, a shocking sense of hostility rushed toward the back of her head. When she turned around, the tip of the metal dagger was less than half a meter away from her. In that moment of crisis, a black circular teleportation gate opened up before the dagger. At the same time, another circular teleportation gate appeared behind the masked man's head. After the masked man stabbed the dagger pierced through the teleportation gate and stabbed toward the back of his head. Another series of sneers emerged from the masked man's mouth. He disappeared and reappeared once more. It was the same angle, the same dagger. However, this time, the target was Emma's back. Watching the two strange attacks from the black-clothed man, Emma thought of a famous name in the Western continent. SAML, Tyrole's national-level ability user organization. One of the level 5 ability users from the Annihilation Abyss. His nickname is Voidwalker, known as one of the most difficult ability users to kill in the entire world. Ability, teleportation. A series of information rang out in Emma's mind. However, she did not have the time to think about why two level 5 ability users would appear in the outskirts of Kyoto at the same time. Facing the masked man's strange attack, she pulled Takeuchi Seda and stepped out. With a flash of black light, the two of them disappeared from where they stood. With a bang sound, Takeuchi Seda's luggage was only halfway in before it was slashed by the metal dagger, turning into countless pieces. Looking at the empty street, the black-clothed man once again let out a series of cold laughs and said the first sentence since he appeared. "Can you escape?" When Emma's investigation in Kyoto gradually deepened, Li Anping was currently participating in a meeting in Tianjin. The contents of the meeting were related to the marriage alliance plan he had previously proposed. He sat at the main seat of the meeting table, a booklet in his hands. On his left were the current clan heads of the 9 great royal clans. Meanwhile, on his right were the leaders of the Xia Dragonfinch led by Lu Sheng and Lu Feng. In the families of ordinary people, marriage was a major event, let alone the current Xia's uncrowned king, Li Anping. His marriage alliance was related to the entire Xia, even the entire eastern continent's rise and fall. However, no one could force him to make a choice. Everything would depend on Li Anping's own will. That was why the booklet in his hands listed all of the candidates that the 9 great royal clans and the Xia Dragonfinch believed to have no problems for Li Anping to use as a reference. Chapter 236. Casually flipping through the contents of the booklet, Li Anping's face was full of indifference. Every page in the booklet had a few photos of a woman. Below them was a simple introduction, including height, weight, measurements, age, personality, horoscope, blood type, family background, education, hobbies, and a self-introduction. Li Anping felt like he was in a beauty pageant or looking at a company's resume. Although the beauties in the booklet were all outstanding beauties, from charming, wild, pure, athletic, and intimate, there were all kinds of them. Li Anping even saw a few women between the ages of 15 and 17. Obviously, the 9 great royal families had fully considered all kinds of possibilities. Not only that, but even Xia Yinyin, Li Qian, Xiao Shuisu, Wang Yin, and other women around Li Anping had been considered and could be found in the booklet. However, the more it was like this, the more Li Anping felt that it was unrealistic. Wang Chong looked at Li Anping's cold expression, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and said, "Sir, if you're not satisfied with these candidates, we can screen them again. In any case, even if it's a marriage alliance, it will have to be after the imperial selection in 2 months." 2 months later, the Xia's imperial selection would be held. This event, where the 9 great royal families would nominate candidates to choose an emperor, had become a formality because of Li Anping's existence. Although almost all the higher-ups in the world already knew that Li Onping was the underground emperor of Xia, his official identity was still the highest person in charge of the Xia Dragonfinch. Only after the imperial selection in 2 months would Li Onping be officially crowned king, becoming the first emperor of the Xia who was not from the 9 great royal families. He might also be the last emperor of the Xia. Li Onping casually threw the booklet aside and said, "We'll talk about the marriage alliance when I come back from Dongyang." After saying that, he turned to look at Lu Sheng and asked, "How's the matter with Lan Lan?" Lu Sheng lowered his head and said, "They have all been annihilated." Okay. Li Onping then asked about the opposition forces in the country. However, ever since the group of people led by Tian Wenhao was dealt with, they either disappeared or joined the government side. The remaining opposition forces were also in a state of disunity. Furthermore, with the Xia's current status as the overlord of the eastern continent, as well as the cleansing of the government, the breaking of the 9 royal clans' monopoly in various industries, the frantic crackdown on crime, and openly using the abilities of ability users to build the country, as well as the supplies sent over by 100 Moon, the Ice Fortress, and the League of Stars. The Xia was indeed moving forward with this series of reform measures, even though it was full of twists and turns. Naturally, fewer and fewer people objected. However, Li Onping was never afraid of opponents. As long as they did not cross the line like Tian Haowen, Li Onping would not care about them. Next, everyone discussed the situation in the country. After Li Onping expressed his opinion, the meeting was adjourned. After all, Li Onping was not involved in politics. Everyone present had more experience in managing a country than he did. What he needed to do was to convey his will to everyone present and let them carry it out in a reasonable way. After the meeting was adjourned, only Lu Feng stayed behind. Li Onping asked, "How's the situation in the Western continent?" According to Tang Weihan's report, the members of the League of Stars who evacuated from Dongyang City have all returned to the Mist Federation. They really went back. Li Onping did not expect the League of Stars to withdraw so quickly this time. Not a single person was left in Dongyang City. What exactly were they planning to do? Lu Feng saw that Li Onping was deep in thought and said carefully, "Tang Weihan asked me to ask if you will continue to stay in the League of Stars or go to the Codex. It is said that the monsters there are getting more and more serious. They have completely sealed off the country's borders." After thinking about it, Li Onping felt that the demons were the biggest threat, so he agreed to let Tang Weihan go to the Codex to find out the situation. After all, no matter how strong the Queen of Heaven was, Li Onping felt that he might not lose to her now. Moreover, after he completed the transformation of the 6 major systems on the Hells map, the League of Stars would not be a problem. However, just as Li Onping and Lu Feng were discussing the situation in the Western continent, the Xia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs received a message from Dongyang City. 2 minutes later, the document from Dongyang City appeared in Li Onping's hands. After scanning the contents of the document, Li Onping's eyes flashed with a cold light. Interesting. It turned out that Dongyang City expressed their willingness to join the Pan-Continent Alliance established by the Xia. Not only that, they were even willing to give up all military construction and let the Xia send troops to protect them. They even hoped that the Xia would build a military base in Dongyang City, so that the Xia's East Sea Fleet could be stationed in Dongyang City for a long time. Dongyang City was the largest island in the East Sea. Within its territorial waters, it had more than 50% of the islands in the East Sea. If the Xia's fleet was stationed there, it would be equivalent to letting the Xia's naval forces radiate the entire coastline of the East Sea. More than 70% of the countries in the East Sea would be exposed to the Xia's cannons. After crossing the East Sea and the long stormy ocean, it would be the location of the Western continent. Although it was much farther than going to the West Sea of the East Sea, it would still allow the Xia's fleet to reach the territory of the Western continent. Dong Yang's actions were like sending a sheep to a tiger's den. He believed that no rational person would do such a thing, but Dong Yang had done so and even sent an official document to Great Xia. This made Li Onping unable to figure out what they were thinking. However, it did not matter. To Lianping, no matter what tricks they were up to, the result would be the same. Since you want me to bring the fleet here, I'll do it. From now on, Dongyang City will be the Xia's port in the East Sea. On the roof of a building, a black teleportation door suddenly appeared. Emma grabbed Tochi Oda and fell out of it. My ability can teleport up to 200 kilometers away. This marked location is 30 kilometers away from the previous location. Samuel should not be able to find this place for the time being. While thinking, Emma spoke to the mental connection in her mind. Pink, tell Hansen to hurry to the agreed location. I found Samuel from the Annihilation Abyss. Understood, leader. Pink's ability was mental connection. Through a mental seed planted in advance, they could communicate over a long distance. After giving the order, Emma began to be on guard. They were both level 5 ability users. Although Samuel was more famous, Emma did not think that she would lose. However, Samuel's target was clearly the ordinary human Teichi Yoda. Once Samuel went all out in a fight, as an ordinary human, Teichi Yoda might die. Furthermore, there were still clues left behind by Yin Bei on his body. Ever since Teichi Yoda fell out from the teleportation door, he had been lying on the ground. He felt dizzy and nauseous as he gasped for breath. It was only a few minutes later that he stood up. Emma looked at him and said, "Your body is too weak. It's like this for the first time. You'll get used to it in the future." Tochi Yoda shouted, "Who are you people? Also, what the hell is that guy from earlier? Why did he attack me? No, I'm going to call the police." After saying that, he pulled out his mobile phone from his pocket. "Do you think that calling the police will be of any use?" Emma looked at him coldly and said, "Against an ability user of that level, forget about the police. Even the army would be useless. Moreover, he did not want to attack you. He wanted to capture you." Emma recalled Samuel's initial attack, and she was certain, that's right. He didn't want to capture Tochi Aoda at the beginning. After that, I intervened and he killed him. However, he only wanted to kill me. Capture me? Why did he want to capture me? I don't even know him. Tochi Oda held his head and said with an irritated expression, "I don't know about that. However, try to recall carefully. Have you encountered anything strange recently?" Strange. Takeuchi Aoda's eyes flashed with a strange light. Seeing that, Emma continued to pressure him. "The person who wanted to capture you is called Samuel. He is a level 5 ability user from Tyrell's official organization, Annihilation Abyss. He has the power to destroy a country by himself. Since he has made his move, it means that you have become Tyrell's target. Do you think that Dongyang's government can protect you? I can give it a try. However, if you can't tell me the reason, I won't be able to help you." Emma slightly exaggerated the opponent's ability. A level 5 ability user indeed had the power to destroy a country. However, the prerequisite was that the country did not have a level 5 ability user. However, her exaggeration was indeed very effective. Tochi Oda's eyes flashed with a trace of hesitation and said, "I don't know if it is because of this reason. However, I have encountered some strange things recently." Chapter 237. It all started 1 month ago. 1 month ago, Tuchi Oita was still like an ordinary graduate. He studied while working, his heart filled with ambition. Even though his conditions were not good and he was penniless, his heart was filled with passion. Until one day, he witnessed a murder scene with his own eyes. It was late at night, and the exhausted Teuchi Oita had just finished working overtime in the company. On his way home, he heard a wretched scream and a weak cry for help. However, when he followed the sound and found an alley, he found a male body within the alley. Pieces of flesh and blood were scattered all over the ground. The unprecedented shock caused Takeuchi Oita to vomit. He hurriedly backed out and pulled out his mobile phone to make a call. However, when he brought the police to the murder scene, there was nothing there. "Wait, you said you saw a corpse." However, after the police arrived, there was nothing? Emma asked. Yes. Fear and relief could be seen within Takeuchi Oita's eyes. It was as though he had finally revealed the secret within his heart. "How long did you leave the scene?" Takeuchi Oita said. Back then, I was too scared and dared not stay at the scene alone. Thus, I stayed outside until the police arrived. In terms of time, it should have been around 5 minutes. All right, you can continue. This matter shouldn't have ended so easily. Takeuchi Oita smiled bitterly and shook his head. Of course not. After that, the police gave Takeuchi Oita a lecture, telling him not to joke around and play pranks. Takeuchi Oita was at a loss for words. Looking at the empty alley, he wondered if he was hallucinating because he was too tired. However, what happened next told him that this was definitely not a hallucination. At noon the next day, he saw another dismembered body in the men's washroom of the company. He screamed frantically and ran out. However, when the company's security guards arrived at the washroom with him, the men's washroom was clean and tidy. There were no longer any dismembered body. Takeuchi Oita was helpless against the questioning gazes of the security guards. Even his superior gave him a day off and told him to go home and rest. However, resting was not helpful. The reason for that was because the situation was becoming increasingly strange. Takeuchi Oita encountered a third dismembered body. This time, it was beside an empty trash can. With the previous two experiences, Takeuchi Oita did not call the police this time, nor did he try to escape. He gathered his courage and stood in front of the corpse, pressing down on his wildly beating heart. He wanted to figure out what was going on. Just like that, at 10 o'clock in the middle of the night, Takeuchi stood alone beside the garbage can, looking at the dismembered corpses on the ground. Seemingly showing the stubborn side of his personality, Takeuchi Oita did not try to evade this time. Instead, he stared intently at the corpse. Thus, he finally saw it. A group of gray wolf-like creatures ran out from the surroundings. They acted as though there was no one around them. Right in front of Takeuchi Oita's eyes, they devoured the dismembered corpses on the ground. Blood, flesh, internal organs, brains, and bones were all gone. Looking at the group of gray wolf-like monsters, Takeuchi Oita crawled out like a madman. He didn't know if it was because he was lucky or if the wolves were already full, but they didn't chase after him. But in the following days, the number of gray wolves seemed to be increasing. Takeuchi Oita had seen them countless times in the vicinity. In the beginning, they were only seen in the dark alleys. However, as time passed, they became bolder and bolder. They began attacking the pedestrians on the streets. Strangely, the others were unable to see the gray wolves. Even those who were attacked and bitten by the wolves were unable to feel anything. There were no wretched cries, no fear. It was as though they were dead, allowing the gray wolves to tear them apart and devour them. Can you describe the appearance of the gray wolves in detail? Emma thought to herself, could they be some kind of ability user? But why would they always appear near Takeuchi Oita? Or could it be that they always appear near Takeuchi Oita's home and company? Takeuchi Oita, who was beside them, spoke without holding anything back. It was as though he was trying to release the fear that he had been feeling for the past month. They look like wolves. They are around 1 meter tall and 2 to 3 meters long. However, they are definitely not wolves. Their bodies have a gray color flame on them. Other than me, no one else can see them. Even when the wolves bite their bodies, they will not react. It is not only the bitten ones, even the nearby people will ignore them. It is as though they did not see them. Takeuchi Oita's face turned pale. Following that, something even worse happened. As the gray wolves and various corpses appeared before Takeuchi Oita's eyes, his mental state grew increasingly weak. He spent his days in fear. Fear of death, fear of the gray wolves, fear of the indifference of people. He feared that one day he would end up like the others and end up in the belly of the wolves. Finally, one day, one of Takeuchi Oita's colleagues was attacked by the gray wolves. Takeuchi Oita watched as the gray wolves devoured his colleague one bite at a time. Seeing the scene before him, he finally exploded. He raised the table and chair to smash at the gray wolves. However, the gray wolves were like illusions. The table and chairs simply passed through them. No matter what kind of attack he threw at them, they were all useless. The surrounding people also showed no reaction to his actions. It was not until the next day that news of him came from the company. The male colleague who was attacked by the gray wolves had run away from home. The colleague who was being devoured alive before Takeuchi Ioda's eyes had actually run away from home. Takeuchi Ioda felt as though he had fallen into an invisible vortex. From that day onwards, he noticed that there seemed to be people following him. He had attempted to investigate this matter. Even after that, he tried to save the people who were devoured by the gray wolves, but to no avail. Wait a moment. When do you think someone was following you? Emma asked. Takeuchi Ioda did some calculations and told Emma. Emma was shocked. As expected, it was on the second day after Yanbei arrived in the capital. If that is the case, the bite marks on Yanbei's body were also caused by the attacks of the gray wolves. But why? What is so special about this Takeuchi Ioda to make Yanbei target him on the third day after arriving in the capital? Takeuchi Ioda, who was beside her, did not think too much about it. He continued, "After that, there was nothing special. I could no longer endure this kind of thing and chose to give up. I returned to my hometown and spent the rest of my life there." After hearing what happened, not only did it not solve Emma's questions, it instead created even more questions. It was as though her mind was in a mess and she was unable to figure out what was going on. At that moment, a man whose body was covered in blood rushed out from the corridor. It was Hansen. The moment he rushed out and saw Emma, he shouted, "Samuel!" In an instant, a pitch-black teleportation door appeared under his feet. The next moment, he stepped through the teleportation door and appeared beside Emma. A metal dagger slashed across the spot where he had been standing. Looking at Samuel, who had suddenly appeared, Emma said coldly, "Where's Pink?" A cold laugh came from under Samuel's mask. He said casually, "Are you talking about that woman? I opened a wound on her chest. If she's lucky, she'll be able to live for another 10 minutes. An astonishing killing intent emerged from Emma's body. A black crack appeared in the air on her palm. It was a half-open teleportation door, a torn space. At that moment, it had turned into a sharp weapon in Emma's hand. However, compared to ordinary sharp weapons, it was over 10,000 times sharper. "Do you know who you're attacking?" Childish threat. Seeing the sharp blade in Emma's hand, Samuel took out another dagger from his waist. The Xia Dragonfinch. Humph. Others are afraid of Lianping, but we're not. He's just a man with a brain full of muscles. You should be glad that he's not facing me personally today." Emma said angrily, "You're asking for death." In her anger, the space blade in her hand seemed to ripple slightly. Even Emma herself might not have been able to detect this slight ripple, but Samuel had noticed it. It was affected by an ability user's mental state and emotions, causing the open space to become unstable. At least at that moment, Emma's power decreased slightly. Samuel's arrogance and disdain disappeared instantly. He was like a calm, poisonous snake, using provocation to anger its prey. Then, he took advantage of the opponent's mistake and attacked. The metal dagger disappeared and reappeared, but there was no blood at the place where the blade had cut through. Only endless darkness, like the deepest darkness in the universe, appeared in front of Samuel. Space door? She predicted that I would attack her from behind. She noticed my habit of attacking in just 2 encounters. This woman is not an ordinary person. Thinking of this, Samuel had no choice but to teleport again. Otherwise, if he charged into the teleportation door, who knew where he would be teleported to? With a flash, he appeared at the edge of the roof. Beside Emma, Hansen and Takeuchi Ioda were no longer there. Samuel said, "Looks like you plan to deal with me first before you care about Takeuchi Ioda." At that moment, he was no longer as arrogant as before. Instead, he was like a precise killing machine, staring coldly at Emma. Emma said, "No, I plan to capture you and find out what's going on from you." Ignorant woman. With a cold laugh, Samuel flickered more than 10 times, appearing around Emma continuously. "We both have the ability to teleport, but the biggest difference between us is the distance we can move and the cooldown time each time we use the ability. Of course, The most important thing is that my teleportation only requires a thought. But her teleportation requires her to open a teleportation door and enter it at the same time. Therefore, her teleportation speed is slower than mine. But while her ability has this flaw, it also has an advantage that I can't compare to. She can open up a teleportation door within a certain range and use the teleportation on me. Therefore, in order to avoid her disadvantage and make use of her advantage, she will definitely make me the target of her teleportation. While using a teleportation door to block me, she will also use spatial cracks to attack me. It's all the same. And on my side, the target of her manipulation is also me. With the same target, what we are competing in is the cooldown time of our abilities and our reactions. As long as the cooldown time of my teleportation is lower than the cooldown time of your teleportation, and my reaction is faster than yours, then you will definitely die. Samuel flashed more than 10 times, each time appearing for less than a second before disappearing again. During these 10 seconds, he maintained the same posture, maintaining the posture of stabbing with his dagger. As the duration of his teleportation was too short, his body did not have the time to change its posture. However, he did not need to change his posture. As long as he kept using teleportation, even if he maintained the same posture and used the same force, as long as he moved his body, it would still be the same as stabbing Emma from all angles. After dodging 2 teleportation portals and 3 spatial rifts, Samuel sneered coldly under his mask. This woman can open 3 teleportation doors at the same time. The cooldown time of my teleportation is about 0.5 seconds, while the cooldown time between 2 teleportation doors is about 1 second. This is a fatal difference. 0.5 seconds is enough for me to kill her 10 times. But considering that she might not have used her full strength, let's assume that her cooldown time is 0.5 seconds. The test is over. So now is the time. Emma opened another teleportation door in front of her to block the attack. In less than 0.1 seconds, Samuel teleported again. His posture did not change. His arm was still stabbing forward, but the position of his attack had completely changed. In the next moment, the dagger would pierce Emma's heart before she could activate her ability. Samuel thought to himself proudly, "My real maximum cooldown time for teleportation is that I can use it once every 0.1 seconds. The moment you decided to fight me head-on, you are destined to lose. This attack is just the beginning. As a 5th-level powerhouse, of course, you won't die so easily. But now I won't give you any chance to escape. I will bleed you dry, bit by bit." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.